address scale, bulk, and mass provided by the Stonegate Design Guidelines D 1.1 through 1.9. It went to the September 18th meeting, where the applicant had a revised plan, and the commission did not feel that these changes were significant enough to address those concerns of bulk, mass, and scale, and it was continued to the October 2nd meeting, which was the last meeting. At that meeting, the applicant came back with revised plans. They reduced the overall height, and they did that by lowering the second floor ceiling height as well as the roof pitch. They also reduced 115 square feet on the second floor by reconfiguring the stairs and the bathroom on the bottom floor. This reduced the mass on the second floor by 4 feet 7 inches, and on the front elevation. With those changes, the commission again didn't feel that the changes didn't fully encompass the previous direction given from the previous meeting on September 18th. The commission gave specific direction, actually 4 items, to the applicant, and to return with those today. One was to lower the plate height of the first floor by 6 inches. This was just directed towards the rear of the house where the common space is. 2 was to shift the entire massing on the north side of the second floor towards the south. The third item was to provide a storyboard with a color palette for the exterior of the building and the retaining walls to include earth tone colors to help the structures blend in with the surrounding natural settings. And the last one was to provide a more clear landscape plan that specifically identified all the species of landscaping to be used to demonstrate that the project design should blend in with the natural landscape. Staff was directed by the commission to provide a resolution of approval with conditions for use if the applicant made all the revisions requested by the commission. So here's the revised proposal. The applicant has met all 4 of the 4 concerns made by the commission at the last meeting. However, the reduced height on the first floor on the ceiling height, they ended up reducing it all throughout the first floor rather than just on the rear area. But other than that, they did reduce the second story massing by 1 foot to the south. They provided the storyboard with a color palette of earth tone colors. And just to point out to you, we had some trouble with scanning and copying the colors, so the applicant provided a swatch, is what you guys probably noticed. We have another storyboard that I could pass around to you. That color palette might be a little bit more legible. The applicant also has alternative colors if you feel that the proposed color is not doesn't meet your requirements for earth tone. Here's the site plan. Not too much has changed from the last meeting. Here on the first floor, again, nothing has changed that you can see on a floor plan. However, the entire first floor has been lowered 6 inches. Originally, the planning commission requested that just the rear portion be lowered and the front portion could stay where it was, which is 6 inches higher. However, they decided that they would lower the entire first floor plate for structural reasons. And on the second floor, here you can see by this dotted red line that they pushed the second floor massing to the south by 1 foot. Basement floor plan has not changed. And here are the elevations. Here you can see the side by side. The original house came up to 24 feet 9 inches, with the reduction being presented to you today is 22 feet 7 inches. Here's the west elevation. Here you can see both the first and second floor are at 8 feet 1 inch. And the east elevation, which is the rear, south elevation, which you would see coming up Baldwin Court, and the north elevation. So with that being said, tonight the commission must determine if the new design changes adequately address the requested revisions from the last meeting, October 2nd, which addressed the appearance of scale, bulk, and mass as provided by the Stone Gate Design Guidelines, D 1.1 through 1.9. Your alternatives tonight is to approve the application for Hillside Development Permit 1201 and Conditional Use Permit 1208 pursuant to the Resolution 13-04, deny the application, and provide reasons the findings cannot be made, and direct staff to prepare a resolution for denial, or continue the subject project and request further information. Staff seeks the Planning Commission's direction regarding the project.
I think there was an error on the slide that showed, I think the height of the first floor is 8 foot 7 inches, not 8 foot 1 inch, did I? Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. That should be 8, yeah.
Yeah,
that's correct.
it's 8 foot 7 inches. Thank you.
As usual, the applicant's here to answer any questions, and I'm here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek.
Is that the same here on the second floor? Just the first floor? Second floor, 8-1?
The second floor is 8.1 and the first floor is 8.7.
6
It's a check.
inches.
Yeah.
All right. We go ahead and, does the applicant want to come up and add anything to the,
Good evening,
presentation? Good.
Commissioners. I just want to say that we did everything you asked for and complied with all 4 of the conditions. At Derek's request, I brought lots of color chips. But actually, I think that the color we selected, we thought carefully about, even though it's not typical of the Spanish colonial style. We thought about the color of the dried grasses and brush and the color of the sand, the sandy soil, basically. And we selected a color that we felt was in keeping with that. And you can probably see in the color board how much darker that is than the original, basically white color. So, but if you wish, I have lots of colors here. Otherwise, I'm available for any questions.
Adele, do you have a larger piece of that color? Or is on, what's on there?
It's on the board.
In your book, you don't, you
It's all
probably cut it up?
Okay. We cut it all up to make,
We got.
Yeah, all these.
yeah.
Okay. Do you have any questions for the architect? I think we're
Okay?
good. Thank you, Adele.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, let's open it to public comment.
Marguerite Schuster, Mount Wilson Trail. Tonight I want to beg you for just one thing. If you decide to approve this project and cannot save anything else, please save the great oak at the southeast corner of the garage, which you will see on your landscaping plan is indeed replaced by another lesser species. This is one of the last great trees on this property. Members of the old Tree Commission do not recall and cannot conceive having approved the removal of this tree. The letter that you received from Caroline Brown notes the remainder of some protective fencing surrounding this tree that suggests that the intention always was that this tree should be protected. My thought is that if there was any tree that was any oak tree approved for removal on this property, that conceivably it was the small oak tree between the 2 walnut trees. It's a nice little tree and worthy of mitigation, but it is not a great and irreplaceable tree. like this one at the southeast corner. One of the difficulties here is, one of the surprising things, is that the removal of this tree appears, even for the current proposed construction, to be altogether unnecessary unless the story poles are incorrectly placed. Any sensitive person would think that a tree of this kind greatly enhances, does not decrease, but greatly enhances the overall value of this property. I urge you, save this tree and require that any time work is being done near this tree, that a certified arborist be present to make sure that all due care is taken to keep this very fine asset intact. Thank you.
Good evening, Terrell Willis, Carter Avenue. Please listen to Marguerite. The transitive property of equality states that if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. The settlement agreement calls for adherence to the Hillside Management Zone Ordinance, and the Hillside Management Zone Ordinance calls for adherence to the general plan. The general plan requires development which is designed to be sensitive to the environmental nature of the foothills, and development sensitive to the unique characteristic found in the hillside areas in the city. This project is not in compliance with these fundamental principles. It is neither consistent with nor serves to implement the general plan, and specifically those general plan goals and policies that pertain to hillside development. If it is approved, this is what we will have on all of the lots: houses that violate the general plan. Thank you very much to all of you for your service.
Yeah, so that's actually on the adjacent property.
All right, we will close the public portion and bring it back to the commission here.
You might want to clarify that.
Letitia, do we have any information
Yeah.
about that tree?
Yes, the oak tree that is mentioned is a tree that is on the adjacent property immediately to the south. And that tree was approved for some trimming by the tree commission. So it's not a tree that is being removed on the property.
So the oak tree's not being removed.
Correct, and it's not on the property.
It's on the property to the south?
To the south, correct.
Okay.
It's right next to the garage.
Well, I'm looking at the survey here, and it shows it on the adjacent property, so. I mean, that doesn't mean part of the canopy isn't on the property, but
So it's not destined to be removed
Correct.
for this project?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Is that a new tree then, next to the garage? This one,
Tijuana?
yeah.
Yes, that is part of the landscaping plan, and it's one of the trees that are being added.
Okay.
Correct.
so it looks like though from these two plans that it's gonna be planted right under the canopy of this oak tree. I mean, this,
Yeah, it does.
Perhaps the
Yeah.
applicant can clarify that for you. It does appear that way on the plan.
well, on the landscape plan, you don't see the oak tree because it's on the adjacent property. but
Correct.
If you look at the survey, they look pretty darn close.
Mhm.
And I believe there's gonna be a catch basin where they plan to plant this new tree.
We'd be happy to move it in.
Okay.
It just might not do very well, and it might not be good for the oak tree.
I mean, that oak tree going out there is fairly large, so it's got a deep canopy. I mean, I guess, yeah, you can move it in. I don't know how far you'd have to.
Or not plant it at all, is it critical to the landscape? It's not critical, I don't, right? Doesn't seem to be critical.
You can condition, if you choose to move forward with the project, you could condition that that particular tree be removed from the landscaping plan, if you wish.
Yeah, I don't know. Personally, I don't see how you're gonna plant 2 trees there, and you probably won't get it far enough north where, if indeed that oak tree's canopy stretches as far as the new garage.
And besides,
seems redundant.
yeah, and the new catch basin and sewer line that is depicted on the
Civil.
grading plan would interfere with where the tree is gonna be planted, and I think would also impact the oak tree. So I'd like to see something in regards to the safety of the oak tree for the improvements of the catch basin and sewer line.
Yeah, you're looking at the civil, right?
Yeah, C1.
If I may, if you wish, you can also add a condition of approval that an arborist be on site when the work is being done to install sewer lines or any other catch basins to protect the integrity of the root system.
Okay,
That's also a condition that can be added.
alrighty, thank you.
That's a good idea.
Okay. So do we have any thoughts? What are our comments?
I'll go. I think they addressed all the issues that we talked about pretty well, except I'm not that happy with the color. I don't know if anyone else thinks about it, but I think.
Darker, lighter?
I think it should be darker. I think it should be more earth color. The whole point of having an earth tone thing is so that'll kind of blend in with the duff and the earth and I actually went up there today and I held the color up against what was there, and to me it looked still looks a lot lighter than I would like to see for it to, I would like it a couple shades darker, where it really sort of fades into the plants. I guess I'm willing to hear what other people think about that. I think the color makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference in how much this house is gonna blend in to the hillside
Mhm.
or pop out.
Yeah.
And I think if it
Yeah.
can be a duller color.
And I agree with that. The color of the field of the stucco, I'm not so sure that's an earth tone. When we said earth tone, we're thinking. You said sand?
So, I went up there today. I was around town looking at different things, and I picked up some of the sand. Here it is.
I thought you had something else in your hand.
Yeah, right. No, that's not what's in this bag. This is kind of the color of the earth up there. I don't think it needs to be as dark as that, but I think it would be nice to have something a little bit darker, a little bit more earthy, just because we're trying to have it blend in.
Richard McDonald on behalf of the applicant. As you can imagine, the word earth tone has a broad spectrum, so that's why we brought
Right.
the.
And I really appreciate your flexibility on this. you
The-
know.
the-
It has
the-
a lot of colors
Good.
just in case.
The
Yeah.
book, we brought the
These
book
are
here.
some other possibilities.
Yeah, and I think
It's
that'd
a
be
Dunn
nice.
Edwards book, not a Sinclair or
Yeah.
others. So I don't know if you really care about brand, but in terms of color spectrum for earth tone, sand, dirt, you name it, they're all earth tone by definition. The question is what end of the spectrum you want to be on, and that's why we brought the book.
I mean, the
So
reason I brought
we're
this
happy
is
to,
This has some of the
Do you wanna
oak
pull
leaves
those
in
out?
it, you know,
we're happy
kind of
to,
colors
bring-
that are actually
if
there.
we- maybe if we I don't know, if you want to give it to Derek
yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
or whoever you want us to give it to.
Match it up with,
We won't
Gina's
bite
dirt
ya.
there.
Yeah, oh, yeah, I have the board here.
I mean, I don't mind the kind of color, but I just think it should be a couple shades a little darker, a little bit darker.
This is
I mean,
the
like this.
color.
Yeah, I mean, like
the
one like this or
chocolate
one a little
This
bit
was our
darker.
other choice.
Yeah.
So, I
Mhm.
mean, we looked at all these
Yeah.
other ones, and I think some
That
of these
one's
are
a-
too
yeah.
yellow.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
kinda like
Some
that.
of these are heading too yellow.
Mhm.
This one is also in the yellow tone. So we were kind of debating
Yeah.
these two, and I could
On
go-
this one, is there, do you have the one that's, you know how they have a matrix, basically?
What's darker?
That's darker,
This is
Yeah,
the
that's
next
dark.
one.
One down.
Mhm.
Can I offer a suggestion? Just a suggestion that I've done on many other projects. Experience has shown that sometimes when paint dries, it dries a different color than these little swatches from the paint
Leave it.
store show. So personal experience on my own home and then on projects, sometimes it's helpful to, once part of a project is up, pick out the 2 or 3 colors that seem to be around which a consensus is forming, paint them, and have a couple of commissioners or staff people or somebody come up and look and see, well, how's it looking, how's it drying, you know, and so you actually physically see it. On a hotel project I did in Pasadena, they made us paint 4 colors on all 4 sides because of the way the sun moved and the way it dried. And I was actually surprised that one of the ones in a book similar to this by a different company that said gray actually dried kind of purple on one side and kind of blue on the other. And the representative of the paint company told us it because it depended on how much sunlight hit it while drying. So then we got into sort of technical issues about when to actually be looking at these things.
Well,
But anyway, it's a suggestion.
I think a good idea would be a condition basically saying, I mean, a mock-up that has to be approved, you know, color mock-up. And usually what you do is have one up, one down, and this guy right in the middle, and usually do it on the south facing and north facing or something where
Right,
you get
exactly.
two.
West facing.
You get-
In this case, probably.
Yeah, north,
Southwest.
southwest and.
Exactly. That's again, I mean, and it makes it easy for people to actually see it, where it's going.
Plus, I know colors, and they look different at every time of day.
Yeah.
So that,
They
you know,
do.
when the light is shining bright on it, it looks a lot lighter than in the evening when the light is blue, and so there's a great variation. But I think when the light is shining bright on the current color, it's gonna be too light. And I think somewhat darker will just, it would help it to blend in, which is what we're really, yes, you know what we're looking for.
Right.
And I'd be willing to have a condition like that, you know, if we can go look at it and.
The
Is that
other
something we
thing
can
is
condition,
if-
or does that need to have clarification before?
It would be best if you chose a color tonight, but if you are not comfortable doing that, we can condition it so that when the time comes for the actual painting of the structure, that there is a subcommittee of the Planning Commission to actually be responsible for then, you know, overseeing that in terms of choosing the appropriate shade that
I
you'd
think
like.
that would be fine.
I'd
Yeah,
like
I mean,
to.
I think, you know, we can sort of, I don't know if we want to do this. I mean, we can sort of suggest, you know, that a color will be like, you know,
Well, there 3 or 4 in there that you liked?
yeah, I
Can we
mean,
condition
maybe,
3 or
you know,
4 and
sort of
just?
like these would be, I don't know.
The problem with that is you're looking
No,
at
no,
it
yeah,
here,
I know what
you're.
they look like outside.
But if they're willing to go ahead and paint it and let us
Yeah.
come up and go, okay, that's the one.
I think
we'll
that's
go with."
fine.
I think that'd be.
I think we can make.
And we
Reduce
could-
swatches, because it's also going to look different once it's on the
That's
plaster.
right, yeah.
Because the
there's all
plaster, even smooth plaster, still has a texture to it.
Right.
Will it be integral, or is it going to be painted,
Could be just 2.
the
Um,
plaster?
It could be up to 3.
Because that makes a difference too.
It does.
Are you gonna do, if you do integral, it's kind of hard to,
Change it.
well, I mean, you can have mock-ups, but
Yeah, you can have mock-ups. The plaster companies would do, you know, big
Boards.
ones that big.
Does that also mean we'd be codifying one color for this house? Or, and that's it?
it's
for the
one
life of
color.
the
For the
house?
plaster, it's one.
The life of the house, right? So if the patient, if the, you know, client wanted to repaint it in 20 years, they have to use the same color.
That's another condition of approval that you can impose, which is a covenant recorded against the property, prohibiting, that would run with the land, prohibiting a lighter color to be used in the future. Unless there's a way to peel back if there are existing CC&Rs on the property, and if the developer still has control of the CC&R document, another way to do that is to put that in the conditions, covenants, and restrictions, the color, and have the housing homeowners association be responsible for overseeing that. So either way. I don't think we need to be so rigid as to say it has to be this exact color forever, but I think it needs to be in that color, tone, and palette.
Well, I was gonna suggest
So that
that,
someone doesn't come
we
and
don't
paint it
want
right
all
now.
the houses necessarily painted the same, and I'm sure you
Right.
don't.
Right.
So if we go up there and the first one's this color, we have some leeway up and down, I would think. Sounds to me like it's gonna be more down than up, but we don't want one of these houses in 3 years being purple. You know what I mean?
White.
Just 'cause somebody bought it and they decided that, we're gonna paint it purple, so there, we'd certainly want a covenant.
Well, I mean,
that it's gotta stay within this range.
what's done a lot of times is, because you can talk about colors forever, is to talk in terms of light reflective value. So you basically say any colors that have an LRV higher than 70 are not gonna happen, basically, because they'll reflect too much light, so like whites and things like that. But anything below, then you leave, at least we leave options for, we're not saying it has to be a tan,
So earth
but
tone.
it has to be a darker shade, because its light reflective value is lower, which is.
It could be tan, it could be something in the green family, it could
Yeah.
be, there's different earthy kinds of things that would fit in there, but.
But unless I'm mistaken, the CUP and the HDP run with the land and are required to conform to the design guidelines in the hillside management ordinance and zoning code that require earth tones. So I don't know that anybody could buy the property and paint it purple in a few years. I think there are limits within the spectrum. There's a spectrum
Yeah.
of earth tone, but I think you can't move off that spectrum.
Yeah. Okay, well, so then I think we can condition that.
Okay.
If I may, regarding the colors, if you can agree on a few tonight, and then leave it up to appoint a subcommittee, 2 or 3 members, to then actually, when it's actually, being tested on the walls, to actually be available to make that decision on site. And that would be a condition of approval on your resolution.
I guess we gotta bring the color.
The problem with that is we can spend 45 minutes with
Yeah.
that book, because they've tagged, like anyone would. So I think the best case to do is, I don't think we had a problem with this color, just the shade.
Yeah. It needs
So
to
if there's
be
any
darker.
way to tag, usually in the book, there's a matrix, there's a darker.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I would tag the 2 darker,
Mhm.
the 2 shades darker than this, and those would be the 3.
Is that the one?
Okay.
We can look at this, and
I
then
think
those.
that's fine.
The chair's point, though, about the light in here and all that, and how it looks outside and how it looks all perfectly correct. And so again, if you want to have us do mock-ups, or if you want to have people come out in a subcommittee, we're fine with that. I get the lighting and the whole issue.
I think we'll have that, and then what we'll do is we'll narrow it to
3.
this and 2 alternates that are in this family, basically, darker, and then we'll go from there.
But that's good. I'm happy with that.
Okay. Commissioner Buckles, anything?
No,
No?
nothing else.
Okay. This side?
No.
No? Kevin?
No, I'm fine.
You're good? Okay. All right. Here, I'll pass these down this way. All right.
I think one of these would be.
I want to start off by saying, I think we've gotten to a point where those items that we depicted last meeting were fully addressed. and codified in the drawings here. So I think, you know, how far we've come, I think this project, where it is now, is meeting, you know, what some of our, most of our concerns were with the bulk and mass, especially on the second story, you know. And so, as far as I can see, I don't have any issue with it. I mean, I think we can condition for the arborist to be on site when the site work is being done in regards to near that oak tree. I think, although the oak tree is not on this property, but will be visually watched during that work, and then the colors, I think we can definitely condition that with the narrowing of 3 and then do mock-ups and investigate that, so. But I think as far as reduction of the mass and scale, I think the height, now we've gotten to a point where I think almost 2 feet were cut off of the project vertically between the 2 floors. So I think we've come to a point where we've met all the, dotted the i's and crossed the t's, so to speak, so I don't have any issues with where the project stands at this point, given the revisions that were made. So,
Do we need to write specific language to go into the resolution for those 2 things before we can? I think they may be working on it right now.
Leticia, do we know, do we need to write in those conditions?
Specific conditions?
Yes.
Okay.
So do we need to give you specific language, or do you want to give us specific language, or? I mean, the one is about having an arborist on site when they're working, and I don't know how you know, when they're working in the area that could affect that tree, which is, I guess, under the drip line or something.
Is this one
Mhm.
potential pay for?
Yeah,
from
the drip line.
City's choice
Yeah.
Drip line to that tree.
Yeah.
Roots and canopy of the
It's a catch
existing
basin.
on the adjacent lot at the southeast corner of the property. Does that work? That's good.
Let's try this on for size. Here's, regarding the arborist condition. Applicant shall pay for an arborist of the city's choice to ensure the integrity and health of the roots and canopy of the existing oak tree on the adjacent lot at the southeast corner of the property. And I think I left out, during the construction of the infrastructure and structure.
Mhm.
Does it say to be on site to?
It's, yeah, applicant shall pay for an arborist of the city's choice to oversee construction of infrastructure and structure on the property in order to ensure the integrity and health of the roots and canopy of the existing oak tree on the adjacent lot at the southeast corner of this property.
I think that's fine. Yeah. And then the second condition was about the colors.
Let's see.
We have the colors over there, specific color selections to choose from over here. So,
Maybe they will.
The other, I think the other item too was the tree, that's the proposed tree
all right.
should be removed or relocated
Which one?
to a satisfactory location that's,
Okay. So,
And I think it's both to protect the oak tree
yeah, I don't,
and also
Right, right.
so that that tree will survive, because if it's in the shade of the oak tree, it probably won't make it anyway.
yeah, I don't think you,
Well, you also don't want to be watering a tree under an oak tree, because that's bad for oak trees.
yeah.
It's underlined.
okay.
What?
On the,
Oh, I think we just passed them back. I think there were 4 altogether.
corner, landscaping. Land should be eliminated. Okay. So it would be the topaz tree, shown on the landscaping plan at the southeast corner of the property shall be eliminated. In order to protect the existing oak tree on the adjacent property. Okay.
Shall be removed from the landscaping plan.
From the landscaping plan, yeah. Do you want to do it, or? Yeah, okay. Oh, you can't read my handwriting, it's terrible. Okay.
So we have a proposed condition here. The Tipuana tree shown on the landscaping plan along the southeast corner shall be eliminated
Okay.
In order to protect.
in order to protect the existing oak tree on the adjacent property. Is that good?
I guess my only other concern about this is, I know that watering under oak trees is not good for them. And I just don't know what else is going to be under that oak tree in the landscaping plan.
I don't think there was
I don't think there is.
There's some ground cover maybe, but
Yeah.
I don't think there was.
I don't think, I'm gonna bring it up, but I don't think it's an issue, but I wanna make sure it's not an issue. Because you wanna protect it.
There's some shrubs and perennials on the south side of the garage, but there's nothing.
All the shrubs and perennials they have are pretty much kind of native,
Yep.
low water use plants, so it should be, I mean, like I said, Matilla poppy hates water. So, I think it's okay. I'm just bringing it up to make sure we're thinking it through.
Do you have the language for the color mock-up?
Yes, if you're unable to select a few
Oh.
examples.
Yes.
Oh, these will be them. Okay, great. Thank you. So it will read something to the effect that the existing stucco walls and fence shall be painted an earth tone color substantially similar to, and then we'll insert these
Okay.
colors. Let's see, in order to blend the structure into the natural landscape, the applicant shall record a covenant against the property which shall run with the land and be binding on all successors in interest, providing that the exterior walls of the structure and fencing shall remain an earth tone color, which is substantially similar to the approved colors, but in no event to have a LRV higher than, did you say 70,
I think,
70?
yeah, usually, yeah.
Okay, will that work?
Well, were we gonna have some subset?
Additionally, additionally, the final selection of color for the exterior walls and fencing is subject to on-site approval of a planning commission subcommittee.
And I think it should also, retaining walls are part of that too.
Retaining walls, yes.
Fences and retaining
Yes.
walls, we wanna make sure that that's,
Fences and retaining
Mhm.
walls, yes, we'll capture that,
yeah.
okay?
Structure, fencing, and
Structure, fencing, and retaining walls, yeah.
All right, I think we got it.
They should, yeah, this evening, yeah. If they approve this, they need to select a if you approve this, you'll also want to select a subcommittee.
Tonight.
Okay,
Okay.
all right. So, I will entertain a motion.
All right, I'll propose that we pass the Hillside Development Permit 1201, conditional use permit 1208, with the following codified conditions, just so stated. That's it.
Can we get a second?
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
And we need to select a subcommittee.
Now, okay.
I would volunteer to be on the subcommittee along with some other person who has good color sense.
Sure.
Do we need two, what's the minimum?
One more, three?
Yeah, I would.
Maximum of 3.
All right.
Minimum of 2,
Well,
maximum
if you already
of
have
3.
two.
No,
3 is good, whatever.
can never have enough architects
Okay.
picking
Do we have
colors.
somebody from the audience also?
So it's Gina, Manish, and Buckles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Now we get to move on to our second item on tonight's agenda. Conditional use permit 1302,
Need to.
177 Merrill Avenue.
The next item is conditional use permit 1302. It's a request to allow the addition of 498 square feet to the existing one-story, 898 square foot single-family resident located at 177 7 Merrill Avenue. The property is a regularly shaped lot located along Merrill Avenue, and to the south is Highland, to the north is Laurel Avenue, and further to the west, I'm sorry, to the east is Mountain Trail Avenue. The zoning of the property is multifamily residential, which is why this triggers the requirement for a conditional use permit. All development in the R3 zone requires approval of a CUP. The existing floor area is 898 square feet. That's just the house. The garage, it's a one-car garage, 195 square feet for a total of existing floor area of 1,093. The total proposed floor area is 1,591. The property is existing legal non-conforming in terms of parking spaces. It requires, every single family residential property requires 2 covered spaces. This property has 1 covered space. It's existing non-conforming. They are not proposing to increase the number of bedrooms. It's a net, it's not a net increase in number of bedrooms, so it does not trigger the requirement to become conforming. The allowable floor area is 2,100 square feet, and the proposed lot coverage is 27% versus the 40%, which is the maximum allowable. When a single-family home is located in an R3 zone, the standards that are applied are R1 standards as required by the R3 ordinance. Here is basically the proposed project. Again, it's 498 square feet being added to the existing residence, and what they're doing is they're trying to accommodate a master bedroom, and they're expanding and converting an existing bedroom into a family room. There's also removal of an existing nook and covered patio at the rear of the residence to allow for the construction of the master bedroom and the expansion of the existing bedroom into a family room. They're relocating the front door to the center of the front elevation, and they're replacing double doors along the north elevation with a window for the kitchen. They're also removing a window along the north elevation and replacing it with a door that will provide access to the proposed family room from the outside. Here you can see this is Merrill Avenue here to the east, and this is the proposed addition. This is the existing footprint of the house with the one-car garage. The existing floor plan, as you can see at the rear here, there's a nook and then also a covered patio. These will be removed. And here is what they are proposing. So there's a new master bedroom here with a bathroom. And then this, what used to be a bedroom here, is now expanded into a family room. So that's why the net result is still 2 bedrooms. There are some other, changes internally here, as well to accommodate basically the flow. And also there's a laundry closet here as well that's being added. This area here is remaining largely as is. And again, they're changing, the front door is currently here, they're just moving it slightly to the north so that it's basically in the center of the elevation. These are the proposed and existing elevations. As you can see here, the front elevation again this is the front door, and they're moving it to the center. South elevation, as you can see here, basically this is the new roof line. The ridge is basically remaining in the same location and height, and they're just adding another roof here to accommodate that new extension in the rear of the house. The rear elevation, existing and proposed, and here's the north elevation. And here is where they are removing the double doors here and replacing it with a window. And then the existing windows, here they're replacing with a door that will provide access in and out of the family room to the exterior. The findings for the CUP, and additional findings for single-family homes. The project is categorically exempt. Actually, it's an exemption. It's a SEQA exempt. It's not a categoric exemption. It is an exemption. Also, just so you know, the pursuant to the Permit Streamlining Act, the applicant has approved a 90-day extension within which the city must make a decision. That, based on that extension, the deadline is now November 1st. So the Planning Commission must make a decision tonight whether to approve or deny. The option of continuing it is not an option tonight. And so again, you have the options to approve the project pursuant to Resolution 1410. You can deny the project and identify the findings that cannot be made. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve conditional use permit 1302 pursuant to Planning Commission Resolution 1410, subject to conditions of approval. This concludes my report. If you have any questions, I'm available, and the applicant is always here, also here. Sure.
If you go back to the A2, which is the proposed floor plan, see they've got it looks like they've got the plumbing area set up for the bathrooms and stuff. They've got nothing in the kitchen. Is that normal? Will they have nothing?
Oh, basically a floor plan of the kitchen. I mean,
It's existing, right?
it's an existing kitchen. They may be making some changes, but, the applicant can address that as well. It is existing here. They are going to remove the door and put a window here, so presumably they may be doing some counter space, changes. They did not include that detail in this drawing. Mhm. But it does exist in that location currently.
It's usually a good thing to see, though, on the plans. It should include that.
There's on-site uncovered parking for,
There is a one-car garage.
there's one car garage,
Mhm.
and is there additional on-site parking in the driveway or something? I mean, is there someplace to?
The driveway is available, although a driveway
It's
does not comply with required parking.
Right,
Um,
But they could park a car in the driveway.
Yes, there,
In reality, yes.
yeah,
Yes, in
Yeah,
reality.
yeah.
yes, there is.
Because the
enough-
garage is also set back from
Right,
the
yeah,
face of the house.
I was there today, so.
Yeah. Now, on that same issue, because there's no net gain of bedrooms,
Correct.
that the non-compliant parking or the grandfather parking can stay as is?
That is correct.
Okay. And then there was, oh, sorry.
Please.
I had one other comment. There was something in here that currently the house doesn't meet minimum sizes? Minimum square footage?
That's correct. It's under the minimum square footage required in our R1 zone.
So
for
actually
single-
by adding on now,
It
they
becomes
meet the minimum
compliant.
threshold?
Correct.
Just 1250 or something?
I believe so. It's in one of the findings.
It's 1250.
That is correct, 1250. Mhm.
It's 11 something.
I was surprised to learn that there was a minimum.
Yeah.
Oh, it's good to know.
98.
Are you at?
Just a procedural question, why is time of the essence here? Why are we getting it so late?
Because the Permit Streamlining Act requires that the Planning Commission makes a decision within a certain period of time, and the applicant is allowed to extend that by 90 days. This application was originally submitted in March of last year. The applicant was working to make corrections, and as you recall, they came before the Planning Commission.
Well,
at
there was
the-
a letter submitted saying.
Right, they requested a continuance at the June 19th meeting because they were not ready to present a drawing. They needed to align, they decided to make changes to align their budget with the cost of the project, as it became clear that it would be more costly, what they were proposing was more costly than they could provide for. So they asked for a continuance, and so that 90 days extension is now pretty much at the end, and they're not allowed to extend it any further, so you have to make a decision.
I get it, but we didn't get to look at the project then, so why, I don't understand. What if we wanted to make some suggestions?
You could condition, if there's something that you would like to condition, you might want to do it that way, but you're not allowed to extend it, and the applicant is aware of that.
So in the case of these streamlining act things, they can put it off as long as they want, but we can't add any on to have more time to look at it after we get it as a late date. That's just how.
You can get it in the 89th day and.
Well, they can't, they can't really extend it any more than they have, basically. They're
No,
only
but
allowed.
as far as
bringing
these
it back
getting
at the
to
last
us
minute,
and being a submittal,
That's
you
just
can
how-
submit as late as the 89th day and then.
If they're within.
Our options basically is take it.
Or turn it down, yeah.
Restart the process.
Hmm. I could see that being an issue on a project.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right.
Can I protest? I don't like the process.
Well,
Okay.
All right.
thing.
Do you have anything else for Leticia? Okay. Do you want to hear, no? Do you want to hear from the applicant? Come on up.
Well, I do want to apologize for, I guess, the process in terms of timing, but I guess I got carried away with the planner in terms of you start with a small expansion, then they suggest more things, and by the time you're you're done, it's turned into this big project that you really were not intending to do, and then you look at the cost and it's way above budget. So that was the main reason why we asked for a continuous to kind of scale it back to where it would fit, I guess, the original budget and my budget. And to answer a couple of your questions, the kitchen, we're not really doing anything to it where the French doors are. It's really just to add some counter space in that area. And then with, I guess, the other question regarding the parking space in front of the garage, there is sufficient. We currently park in front of the garage, so that's not a problem.
And I know it doesn't count for a space, but it can be used as a space.
Right.
Keep cars off that kind of narrow street that you live on, that house is on.
And it's a small house, and the only thing I'm trying to do is make it a functional, I guess, small house still. It's not going to be a very big house. And I think that will add to the value of the property as well as to the neighborhood.
How old is this house?
It was, I think it was built in the 30s, 20s.
So, but it's been a functional house since the 30s. I just wanted to, okay.
It's a small cottage.
Just want to make sure you didn't build a small one 2 years ago and decide it wasn't functional.
No,
This
no,
has been a functional house since the 30s.
It's back then it was pretty functional.
Okay, yeah.
Now it's not.
I mean, typically, and this is a small comment, you went through a lot of detail in outlining your proposed. It's always a good idea to show all features, like the kitchen, especially just as information for, I know you're not doing much in there, but you want to get that on here so that when we look at it, because we have no idea what we're, I mean,
It doesn't say kitchen, we don't know it's a kitchen.
we don't live there, so for us to kind of decipher what's happening, but anyway, that's,
And that's a learning experience, and for that, I do apologize.
yeah, that's okay. All right. Do you have any questions for the applicant? No? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll open it up to public comment. All right. Not seeing a rush to the podium, we will close public comment, bring it back to the commission.
I'd like to start off by saying that for the first time in a while, this proposed project reflects the scale of the neighborhood in which it is proposed, actually truly applies to this, to the addition onto this house, and it's a real pleasure to see a house that doesn't look oversized, that isn't going to appear oversized for the neighborhood
Yeah.
with the addition that's put on. It's I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I agree with that, in that this seems appropriate for the size of the lot. And I think the design looks good. I think it looks good.
Yeah, it's particularly under-ambitious, but, you know, it's the first time we've had somebody talk about having a budget. Most of us probably can understand, so it's understandable and, I guess, commendable on both ends. It helps us out both ways.
Well, I have to say I'm in favor of it. It looks to me like, I don't like see older small houses torn down. I certainly like to see them worked with, and he certainly looks to be working with this one, so I'd be in favor of it.
I think the findings are met. I think it's improvement to the neighborhood. I like the way it fits in.
I concur with all of those comments. I think, you know, having driven over there to this afternoon and looked at the street, I mean, it's a series of, it's kind of hard to believe this is, in one of my comments, this is an R3 zone.
Yeah.
Another quirk of our zoning here, but just kind of funny, there was a series of houses that all, I think the whole block had one single-car garages, were quaint, sort of old cottages and bungalows, so I think this isn't fitting with that, even with the addition, and any project that actually by adding meets the minimum threshold of size of house, you can't really argue with that, so I'm equally in favor of this project, so.
I think, I've said this many times, that one of the great things about Sierra Madre is this mix of little and big and old and new, and this is like an exemplary example of kind of protecting that mix of smaller, older houses in town. So I would like to move that we approve PC Resolution 1410.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, moving along here, we will go to the third item, conditional use permit 1404, 122 North Baldwin Avenue.
Assistant Planner Derek Purification will deliver that report.
Good evening, Commissioners and Chair again. The item before you is conditional use permit 14-04, located at 122 North Baldwin Avenue. Some quick project information. The applicant is proposing to legalize a 1,752 square foot residential unit. This unit is located in the basement level of a 4,500 square foot commercial building. The first story, or the, I guess, ground level, is currently being used as office, and the second floor is currently being used as a salon. The zone and the land use designation are both commercial, and the property is surrounded by both commercial to the north, east, and south, and then across the street on Baldwin is institutional, which is Bethany School. Physically, the site slopes downwards towards the south and the east, which exposes the basement level along the south and eastern elevations. There currently are 12 uncovered on-site parking spaces, and the proposed unit, there's a typo, proposed unit includes 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, kitchen, living/dining room. The project does not propose to add any square footage. Pursuant to municipal code, CUP is required for residential uses other than on the ground level, which are consistent with standards of R3. The applicant is also requesting an alteration of some of the R3 standards. Those include setbacks, lot coverage, patio area, common area, refuse storage or trash, and off-street parking. Pursuant to code, alterations to the R3 standards may be permitted pursuant to the approval of the CUP. Here is the site plan, Baldwin Avenue here on your left side. The 12 parking spaces, there's 11 here on the south portion, and the 12th one is up here on the northeastern. Here's the actual building. As I mentioned, the site slopes kind of south and towards the east. Here is where the basement is exposed. Sorry, this is a little light. This is what we had to work with, but this is the existing floor plan. If you visited the site over the weekend, you probably noticed that they're actually doing some construction. They had permits to basically structurally make things safer in the basement. Previously, I think there were 2 units prior to Alan owning the property. There were 2 units that were under code enforcement, and things in there weren't really up to code, so they got permission and permits to actually shore everything up and make everything a little bit more structurally sound. This is what they're proposing. As I'd mentioned, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, the living and dining room, and the kitchen. The floor is actually going to sink down. Is it about a...
We're hoping to get to almost 10-foot ceilings, and existing we're a little under 8, so we're almost 2 feet.
So they're lowering about 2 feet the floor to get taller ceilings.
They're gonna excavate what's there now?
Yes.
Concrete.
Okay, because there's not 10 foot now.
There's not, no, that's
Yeah,
correct,
I
yeah.
don't know if there's
Those-
8
Yeah,
foot
so they will be going lower on the floor.
Huh?
They're gonna bust all
They're gonna bust all what's there, okay.
Here's the elevation. Elevations on the exterior won't change too much other than, a door being closed off and having a new door changed out. This is just the front elevation. The east elevation, which is the rear. Also photo that. This is the north elevation alongside the Verizon switching station. Here you can see the basement level windows and the light well. And this is the east elevation, which is also technically the front entrance to the unit, which would be here. These are the findings that were made. Staff was able to make all the findings for this project, and we do recommend that the Planning Commission approve conditional use permit 1404 pursuant to resolution 14-15, subject to conditions of approval. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer any. The applicant is also here as well.
So there are an adequate number of parking spaces, but they're not covered.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, the office use and the salon use would actually require 9, whereas the residential unit would actually require 2 enclosed and 1 uncovered for
Requires
guest
3,
parking.
and there are 12 spaces there.
There are 12, that's correct, but they're all uncovered.
Thank you.
So you're gonna knock out the concrete that's there, excavate 2 feet down, and then lay a new floor?
So the, by the way, I'm Alan Graves. Hi, it's nice to meet you all. In answer to that question, the foundation work was really independent of the CUP. When I bought the building and inspected the foundation, I knew it needed to be done. And so both the foundation work would happen if I was doing nothing else. And the decision was made to go about the foundation work by putting in new pylons. And since we're digging in and setting new pylons and the existing concrete's getting torn out anyway, it's really just shovel work to get a proper ceiling height. And I said, yeah, since I'm going all the way down to put in whole new pylons, whole new support systems, why have subpar ceilings at that point? And so we're literally digging at, first we put in new pylons, they're about halfway through that. Once the new support structure is in place, then they're going to take out the old, dig down around the newly poured pylons. And
So
we'll-
then will you step down into the unit from the outside?
So right, as you come in the main door, you'll come to a landing.
Yeah.
The landing will look down into the main living area. The living area, the kitchen will be kind of one big flow-through great space.
And that'll be exposed?
And that'll all be open and exposed. I'm leaving the support exposed too. It's actually going to be kind of a period, look for the building. It's got a really nice existing fireplace I wanted to preserve, so we actually have a plan to dig around the fireplace and pour underneath it so that the fireplace,
Just the one end?
right, that's right.
Is the fireplace original?
That's right, and it's really what made me decide to keep residential. The building was built in 1920, and it was the city's first hospital, and the space was originally dug out as the residence of the doctor who ran the hospital, and so it has a big, kind of pretty 1920 whatever residential stone fireplace in the middle of the room. And as I took over the space, I knew I was going to get the existing tenants out. I did not know, by the way, that it was an unlawful occupancy. That was a joy I picked up about 2 months into owning the building, right? And I was shocked to learn that you could do that for 10 years. These people had been there a long time. But anyway, I looked at it and I thought, really residential makes more sense given, what it was built for in 1920. It's got this pretty fireplace. It was kind of born to be a residence to begin with.
So that was a residence for the doctor?
It's sort of a neat story. So the doctor lived under there. There was a doctor and a nurse assistant, and they had this giant kitchen, and there's a dumbwaiter inside the walls we found, and they would cook in this residential unit that was also the doctor's home and pull the meals up in the dumbwaiter, and they would appear in the upper level and get served to the patients. The main level is now my office. I, by the way, live 3 blocks. I live on Grandview at 60 East Grandview across from St. Rita's. So I bought the place so I could walk to work. My wife just had a baby, and I was like, I'm done driving. So my office is there, and yeah, as we were remodeling my office, the dumbwaiter was actually in the wall where they would pull the food up from the kitchen and the residence down below. There was a blue office and a pink office because there lived a lot of babies there. But that was the original space.
But is your intent then to rent it out?
At some point that'll happen. It turns out that when you have lots of family all around the country and a baby, what you need most is a guest house. So in fact, I doubt it'll be rented for about a year. I suspect that through next Christmas at least, this will be the visiting home of Graves family members. But one day, I suspect we'll turn to it for some revenue at some point, although not right away.
So I've got a few questions for you here. Noticing your plan, I applaud you that you're going to put in an actual trash enclosure, but were you intending on putting it in front of your new bedroom and storage area?
Yeah, the storage area is an existing storage area that was built obviously many, many years ago as a lean-to to the structure. So once upon a time, the exterior wall of the building, there was no storage area, and it was built right onto the side. So the storage area exists, and it's a closet that's not contiguous with the building. It never was, and I wouldn't want to mess with the wall in between them, right? So
You're going to put your trash unit.
That's
It's
right.
an apartment-sized trash dumpster
That's right.
in front of the bedroom window and
there-
a door that goes into that.
There will not be fenestration over the trash unit. If the plan shows fenestration, the answer is no, it will not. I do not plan to have a window view over the bedroom. That's not the only out-facing wall for that bedroom. We would put the fenestration facing on the other walls.
That is the only out-facing window for that bedroom on your proposed plan. You've got a couple of windows from the bathroom, but putting your trash enclosure right here, blocking that, and then basically giving a nice view into your commercial trash enclosure.
All right.
I don't know if you intended that, but
I see.
you are doing that.
Yep.
So that's,
I see what you see.
and that has to be an egress window, so you can't really dump people
Oh, yeah.
in case of a fire into a trash enclosure.
So, well, of course, it would be a 3-hour rated trash enclosure.
Wow.
No, I think the right thing to do then is to relocate the trash
That's
enclosure
gonna
to
ne- that's gonna-
behind the storage, right? You put it back there.
Well, so that brings me to my next point. You're in a commercial zone, you're retrofitting or introducing residential. We can argue the merits of why it should be commercial, but what governs here is an R3 zoning for residential that's introduced into a commercial zone. We don't have a mixed-use zoning that kind of talks about residential within commercial, but you basically have to comply with R3 zoning. So one of the requirements is you need to provide 150 square feet of patio area for this residential unit. And I noticed on the list here, it says you're not able to, or whatever the case may be, but I'm asking a question why you can't provide that.
Sure. So I think there's a couple of answers to that question. And the first is that, I mean, I saw you came by today, you saw the unit. There's really not a great way in this setting to make an enclosed patio. There's not a place where it's going to be attractive or effective. And the other issue, as I see it, is this. I bought a building that had had an illegal tenancy in it for 10 years. The guy who owned it before me made $1,800 a month, every month for 10 years. And I said, no, I'm going to do the right thing. So what we're really having today is a story about what happens to people who decide to comply. And one thing that could happen to them is you got to build a lot of things. Compliance could be really disincentivized. We could set an economy where the wrong thing to do is to open your mouth. The
But
guy who
I
owned it
think
for 10 years
that's a-
before me was
I-
much smarter than me, right?
I see where you're going with that, but at the same time, that's an amenity that you should provide. Why not? It's a residential unit. Why wouldn't you provide an outdoor patio area?
Yeah.
It's a requirement.
Well, I think one thing to keep in mind is exactly as you said, John, the issue is exactly what you said. We don't have a mixed-use code in town. And most neighboring cities, even small cities like South Pasadena do. The way that we accommodate mixed use in commercial is by applying the R3 standards with altercations as approved. And I think that it's important to keep in mind it's altercations to the R3 standards. It's not a variance where you vary from standards that apply to that thing. And so it's sort of like an ad hoc fixing which of these standards really are important for a mixed-use setting, and which of them really make sense more in a neighborhood of a multifamily. And I think what you have here is a situation where you have a place that's functioned as residence in the past, has a long history as residence, is large, so you're not going to have a small unit like a multifamily, numerous small units that really use that space.
But it's
And because
it's partially subterranean, right? The residence?
Yeah.
I mean, I know on the south and the east, it's exposed pretty much to grade. But your argument that it's a large residential unit, therefore does not need sort of outdoor space, why not?
I think part of the answer...
Indoor space and outdoor space are two different things.
Yeah, I think part of the answer might get to the issue of the reason for the rule, right? Why is there a requirement to provide a minimum patio size? And the answer is that a lot of people who are renting units don't have a ton of economic options, and we want to set some base minimums for those folks. We're talking here about building a single 1,700 square foot unit. If I was trying to maximize income, right, if I was a developer, I'd build 2 or 3 units in this space. That would be the smart thing to do. And if I was that guy, yeah, maybe that guy should put in some patios, right? Because he's really here maximizing what he's getting. I'm looking at a unit that will someday be rented with 1,700 square feet, 10-foot ceilings, and if I can't find a tenant who thinks it's great to have that unit without a patio...
That's not what we're arguing, though. It's not whether for market reasons that it seems great to have. It's an amenity that you should provide. as part of it's almost this unit is bigger than the house I live in. And so the point being, I would like to have some outdoor space that's dedicated to it. Why not? And I don't see a reason why, if you worked the plan that you have here, I spent a little bit of time out there, and I was able to come up with probably a location where you could carve out some space.
I suppose, I mean, the answer is, obviously, one can physically do anything. I don't think altering the building in that way makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
I liked that I had a plan that kept the building just like it was on the outside.
But your plan also had a trash enclosure in front of the window, so I mean, let's be honest here, like, you gotta, I think you gotta take another look at this, and there's several issues here that, you know, I don't wanna belabor the point, but I think that was one issue that I had. And the other is, you have parking here, but you're saying you're not able to provide 2 covered spaces that are dedicated to the residential, and I'm trying to figure out why. And I know you can't provide a garage unless we made some concessions within the setback area here on the east side, I guess, behind the building there, but there's ample space to provide two spaces there.
Yeah, I think there's 2 thoughts I have on that. One is, when we originally designed this plan, it left the building looking just like it was when I bought it, and largely like it had been throughout its existence. Staff asked that we add a trash enclosure, which we did at their request. And I don't like sort of causing, in preserving the original use of the building, all of a sudden we're tacking a lot of things onto it to make it look different, which seems counter to kind of overall what we'd like to do, right? I believe in adaptive reuse. I've got a unit that I'm going to make great on the inside without changing the exterior appearance. I think, yes, you're right, we could interpret the code to tack on a lot of things to the outside of it. I'm not sure that makes it better.
We're not tacking on anything. These are requirements. These are not things we're just arbitrarily throwing on your project.
No, I understand.
So I take a little bit of, affront to that. I don't think we're tacking stuff onto your project. And I think the perception that because you're reevaluating or bringing this up to code, that therefore there should be these concessions made. Well, that's one way to look at it, but I also look at if there's a possibility to provide the things that are required, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think
Why couldn't you?
The question is, what do we want the economy of voluntary compliance to be, right? As you know, the city has a lot of unlawful units in it, and people make economic decisions about whether they're going to do the right thing or not. And today is a tale of what happens to the guy who shows up with nothing but his own idea and says, hey, I want to comply. And now we're going to see what are the consequences. And other people in my position will learn from that, right? What do you get when you decide to comply?
Yeah, I mean, well, we're still asking questions, but I mean, I don't disagree with the onerousness of the request, that we, I mean, I'll just give you an analogy to something that happened to me when I was in Long Beach, and I had a staircase that I inherited that was illegally built, and the kind of answer I got initially from the city was to put an elevator in my house.
Oh.
And so that's a kind of ridiculous, I mean, that was kind of a ridiculous example. We came to a meeting of the mind, and I had to meet with the director of the department, which is no easy deal in that city, and got a modification, which would have been easier in this city. But so, I mean, I'm sympathetic to what he's trying to do with the building. If you've got, I mean, the patio sounds like a good idea. I don't know about the parking situation, but I mean, if you have some place without carving into the building, and I don't know.
Well, I mean, my point is that even in where spot 12 is marked, there's enough real estate there to get two cars parked. I mean, you couldn't get a garage in there, and I think, Leticia, you clarified part of that's because there would be no way to meet the rear setback for an enclosed structure. And you may be hard pressed to get a carport.
You might need to agree to an alteration as an encroachment of the rear yard setback if you require cover parking in that location. But that's again, an alteration that you could approve as part of the CUP if you wish.
I mean, having walked out there, that where spot 12 is, there's a curb, I don't know what the curb, there was maybe a future structure or something that was gonna be built, there's a couple concrete curbs.
There's a bunch of metal
And,
sitting.
yeah,
bars
for
sitting
construction, but pacing that area, I mean, there's enough room to get 2 spots in there. Part of my reasoning with that is, this really keeps the residential parking separate from the commercial parking. And right now, it's commingled, and there's nothing you can do about the guest spot that's required, which, you know, you can argue is a little bit onerous to ask 2 spots in addition, and then a 3rd spot. But the guest spot would be the only one that would come off of the, sort of the parking bank on the south. And there's nothing you can really do about it, although you could relocate that somewhere as well. But the 2 dedicated residential that should be enclosed or covered could, if you took that area where spot 12 is marked on the site plan and took it all the way to the back wall or property line, in this real estate here, you probably could work 2 spots.
What's to the, east of this? I can't remember.
I think it's the Verizon.
It's a Verizon switching station. It's actually a 2-story solid brick wall.
Yeah.
There's no fenestration facing, it's literally solid brick all the way up.
Right, yeah, I know that building.
There's a gap, kind of a wedge gap between your wall and that building, but
It's not like businesses or houses or someplace
No.
where having something really close to the property line would be.
There, actually, I learned aren't even full-time employees in the building. Not only are there not windows that they could see me, they just have techs come and go.
And I mean, I think in this case, the enclosed parking isn't really, the reason we have parking to be enclosed is so you don't see the vehicle, like you park inside a structure and you don't see the vehicles. But I think here, behind the building, it's shrouded anyway, and the structures around it is a large building with very few windows anyway, and probably no inhabitants, except a bunch of equipment. So I think it's a unique case in that way, but I don't see any reason why on surface there couldn't be 2 spots that are dedicated for the residential located there,
Right.
not enclosed, but.
Yeah, and I agree. And I've walked past that building quite often and noticed the sea of concrete.
Trash.
The driveway, the parking lot, it's all concrete. There's no landscaping except for the big tree.
You mean the avocado tree that kind of sticks out of the middle there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, which is unfortunately very unpopular with my tenants who complain that the avocados fall in their cars.
Well, they can take them home.
You know, I didn't get as jocular a reaction to that suggestion as you would think I might.
Leave the sunroof open, just whatever
No,
floats.
I think you got some good ideas here, but you're just not there yet. But I think it'd be a great residential use if it's the covered parking and some outdoor space of some type, and if it's green, if it's turf. I think somebody would enjoy that, you know? And I applaud you for taking on the building, because it's a historical building, very much so of the city. But, yeah, I got some really struggling with it. It's a commercial building, and it's a commercial site.
Hold your thought, till commercial break here.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for the applicant?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
At this time, let's open it up to public comment, if there is any on this project. Come on up.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to talk a little bit more about this. Alan asked me to talk to you a little bit about the application of the R3 standards. Tom Pendlebury originally designed the reuse, and he's moved to Florida, so he's not available. I think that as we already said, it is an existing use, and I think that doesn't mean that there should be any concessions granted, but that does mean that to the extent there's discretion and you're considering the ability of the site to handle that use, it's shown that it over many years that it can. It's also, as we've said, a long-standing structure that we want to keep the same feel of. And I think the other main point is that these aren't concessions to rules that apply. These are alterations to a standard that doesn't really fit. And that may sound legalistic, but I think it's a really different mindset in looking at it. We have to think of what makes sense for a mixed-use project. And so I think, as you were saying, the issue of covered parking makes sense in a residential area because you sort of want to hide the cars. It's not such a big scene here, especially in a place where they are tucked behind the building. There is actually greenery on the south side. If you walk it, it looks like that greenery the south, but it's actually part of this property. Those little curbs that are there on by the 12 parking were, we think, some foundation of a building project that was abandoned long ago. We don't know what they're for. And we could easily take those out, and you could stripe 2 in there so we could get 13 spaces. That's not an issue, I don't think. And the trash enclosure was obviously a late add, because it's grandfathered. It's been pre-existing, but then we thought, well, no. Staff said, hey, be good to have a trash enclosure, and we thought about it and said, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, whether it's commercial or residential. So that was the location that was added there, and if you guys want to put a condition of approval that it be moved to a different place or put in a place appropriate with staff, we'd be happy with that. I think the other issues that come up, there's the setbacks. Again, the north setback is non-compliant. That's pre-existing, and it's up against a 30-foot block wall. I don't think anybody's going to be harmed by that. The lot coverage is an issue of what gets counted and what doesn't. In the commercial zone, we have a lot coverage of about 15% when we're allowed 80. And in R3, we have a lot coverage of about 75% when we're allowed 55. And that's because the parking is counted in R3 but not in commercial, and I think the commercial standards really seem more appropriate in this case. We've talked a lot about the patio and common areas issue. Again, we think that's really more appropriate for a multifamily apartment building and not as appropriate in a commercial area. It's not really an issue of wouldn't it be nice, but it's just not something that makes sense in this. If you think it does, then I guess we could try to work it in. Parking, we've talked about parking. I think it's important to note that in the past, in interesting spaces, we've waived the covered parking requirement. In fact, there's no covered parking requirement in the whole canyon. So something that's a little bit funky like this, I think getting the spaces is more important than covering them. And we talked about trash. Signs, there's a new sign that's up that's going to meet the commercial zone. There's not going to be any specific residential sign or anything.
And was part of the process too to restripe or condition to restripe the current commercial parking?
No, we haven't gone to that. The current parking, there's 2 spaces that are not compliant because they sort of go around the avocado tree. So there's one space that's really big that has the avocado tree, and then the ones next to it I think are 6 inches too narrow. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of room along that side to have 12 compliant or 11 compliant spaces, but in order to get that, we'd have to take out the avocado tree. So if that's something that you think is important to restripe, that's something we could do, but it functions now even with those 2 spaces being a wee bit narrow.
But they're also kind of striped really, funky, some of them.
Well, yeah, I don't think there's anything in the code that says, there's the diagram in the code that talks about the angles and whatnot, but it doesn't say anywhere that you can't have some more angled than others. And again, I think that angling comes because of the tree, because you see if you start from the east, you have ones that are right angles to the drive aisle, and then you have that one giant one that accommodates the tree, and after that they get angled. So
you could make the argument that if it's not striped regularly, there's also a potential issue of I parked the way the stripes dictated, and when I backed out, I jammed into the car next to me, and I had an issue.
Well, again, if
I know it sounds silly, but that kind of stuff happens.
we really haven't. I've walked by the building for many years, and I haven't really seen much parking issue. And in the time that Alan's owned it, he hasn't. But if you guys think conforming those parking spaces is a big issue, we'll take out the tree and paint them in a regular fashion. That's not a big concern.
Another thing that I didn't raise, which I wanted to get your take on, was it is a unique situation. But that the residential unit or the residence opens onto the parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it opens onto the parking lot in such a fashion that you're basically in the drive aisle of that parking lot. I know there's probably more than 25 feet there from.
Yeah, there's a lot more.
man, you come out of those double doors and you're on the drive out, you know, and I'm wondering if there's any way to mitigate that by putting something there to demarcate kind of, this is the entry to the residence. I don't wanna barricades not the right.
Well, if we put in barricades or bollards or something like that, I think, you know, it'd be more likely that someone driving on the drive aisle would whack into them. I mean, we could spray paint, you know, stripes, but
I think it needs something, or like the door, the entry to this needs to be recessed back or something. I mean, you're not providing any sort of approach area where that isn't out of the public, not public, but sort of the commercial right of way there, as far as going in and out. I think that's.
I think the issue with recessing is the goal was to keep the appearance as close to existing as possible. I don't know structurally if that's an issue. But you know, the other part of it is it's not like a drive aisle that goes somewhere, that people zoom down. It's just a parking lot. It hasn't, like I said, it's functioned as residential for many years. I know it functioned as office for a while, but when it was office, that was the front door then there as well, and I don't think there's ever been a problem. So yeah, it's a little funky, but it's Sierra Madre. Yeah.
I think the other point I wanted to make is as we look at these changes, the alternatives aren't just residents and no residents in a vacuum. If the decision's made that, if I made a mistake in complying, right, if I was a fool and the guy before me was smart, then it's commercial. And if it's commercial, you could fit an awful lot of cubes down there and I'll rent it to whoever rents it. And when you're weighing what you want done here, it's not residents or nothing in a vacuum, it's residents or a commercial unit. And it's a commercial unit with many more cars, a lot of the negatives I'm hearing, for example, the door opens onto the parking lot and 2 residents might walk in and out of the door every day. If it's commercial, 30 employees might walk in and out of the door every day. I submit to you that the residential use, lower traffic, lower impact, and just the residence itself is a mitigation of all the things that seem to be of a concern. It reduces, doesn't increase the volume for all of these situations.
Maybe
Let's open it to public hearing. Come on up.
Hello, my name is Diane Planadin, and I reside at 298 Old Ranch Road.
I'm Lee Johnson. I'm also at
298.
Old Ranch Road.
He's here to give me moral support.
All right.
He's good at public speak.
I am one of those tenants that resided in that building, not knowing that it was an illegal dwelling. I resided there for 7 years, and there are 2 entrances to that basement. I don't know if you know, but the building was divided. The bottom part was divided into 2 sections. So there is also a door on the northeast side of that building.
It's a staircase.
Okay, and that is subterranean. Well, I had a lot of problems with the landlord, and I had to one time call the health department because of flooded out the bottom basement. And the health department told me that you cannot live in here, and I had to move the next day.
Wow.
So that is illegal to
cannot
live in
live
a
in a
basement. So regardless
Period.
of this new owner wants to do his R zoning, I understand that, but it can't be done with that building because it's illegal to live in the basement, according to the LA County Health Department. So, and also I understand that you don't need conditional use permit if it's a commercial building, you don't need to change it into residential or do a conditional use because you can reside on the lower floor. Is that not correct? In a commercial building, you can reside on the main floor, as I understand, correct? Isn't that what the permit states here?
I think you would still need, it's a different use, right? So.
Yeah, the commercial zone ordinance allows residential uses that are not on the ground floor. And being that this is a basement, that's why this would be allowed. But it's by conditional use permit only, it is not by right.
But even living, since it's a commercial zone, if you wanted to create residences on the ground or the second floor, residential units per se.
You would need a conditional use.
You still need a CUP.
Absolutely.
Behind or above, right? Could be
Yes.
It
behind.
says residential uses
Not on the-
other than on ground
Not
level.
on the ground level, right. And this is a basement, so it's not the ground level.
So you could, from my understanding, you could reside on the ground level without having an R1 in a commercial building. Is that not correct? That's what the code says.
No, I think you got it a little
Am I mixed
twisted
up?
there, yeah.
Okay, well.
They are.
Anyway, that is, I had to move the next day, and I realized at that time that wasn't a legal dwelling.
Yeah.
And there was a court case and everything, and a lawsuit all originated from this, because the last owner was renting it out illegally. And according to the health department, you cannot live in the basement.
They requested that you vacate. right?
Yes, immediately, for health reasons, other than, maybe the fumes. You can get radon in a basement. It's not a legal dwelling. And it was built in the 20s, so there is a fireplace on one side. And it's a very nice, basement. It's very spacious, it's very nice, but it's not legal. And also, I was told that you cannot, what was it? It wasn't even supposed to be used for office either. It's supposed to be storage only, according to the county records, the bottom floor. So, I don't know, is that what the new owner was proposing to rent out the bottom? So,
Yeah.
I thought I would bring this up.
All right.
So, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else? All right, we will close public comment, bring it back to the. Who would like to start us off?
Can I just ask the applicant a question? I want to make sure I understood your remarks. So you don't want to make any changes to the project that would be suggested here? You're saying, you said if you had to do some of these things, you just take it to commercial?
No, I think that if there are new conditions that are imposed other than the ones already suggested by staff, the answer is I'll go research how much they're going to cost.
Okay.
And we'll make the choices that we make.
Okay.
But no, it's not like I have some principled position. I would never do anything that you might suggest. I think that at some point my desire to preserve and keep this nice residence if we make it expensive enough, okay, you
Got
got
it.
an
Okay,
office
I just
building.
wanna
But it's
make
not,
sure I
it's just,
understood what you were saying.
that, yes, there is some level of expense at which I'm not going to go any more rounds with these guys, you win, but no, there's certainly
No, it's
the
not
answer is
meant
to go
to be.
figure out
I
what it
just wanted,
costs.
if you weren't open to any changes,
No, it's-
and that was gonna change probably the length of the discussion.
A couple things, and maybe I'll come back and talk about a couple more things afterwards. I think it would really be important to move that trash enclosure, because trash smells, you don't want to have it right next to I would not want to have it right next to where I'm living. And I would put it sort of over in the other side, in like where if you could get 2 parking spots where number 12 is, I would put the trash enclosure like over in number 11 or something, so that it's not next to the unit, because I have lived in places, in apartments, where there was a garbage thing, and it smells, and it's unpleasant, and people are gonna be coming in and tossing their trash in when you're trying to sleep and whatnot. So I think there's ample opportunities for moving that away. Away to the other side of the building, I think it would make for a better place. I think that the requirement for having some outdoor space is not trivial, actually. I think it's important, and I think, especially because this opens directly onto a parking lot. That presents a certain kind of possible danger, especially if you had children living in here, or visiting in here, because kids run outdoors. If you look away for a minute, I've had my kids do that when they were young. And if there could be a place for some outside space, which could be where that trash enclosure is, or something, it would provide an amenity which is required in the R3, and I think it would be possible to provide that. And this is not by changing the building.
Yeah.
It's by offering a fence around an area and a bit of space for some
Green.
greenery. Well, I'm not saying you have to build a wall. I'm not saying you have to alter the building. It's altering some part of this, of the parking lot. And I think that could be possible. This issue of not living in a basement, I don't know, I can't speak to the specifics of the people who are living in that place, but the basements are adequate in size and meet the requirements you can. We just approved a house that had a basement space that you could live in. It requires certain height of ceiling, and it requires ventilation, it requires, ways to get in and out of each room and so on. But it's not illegal to have residential space in the basement. To the issue that the standards don't fit the residential use in a commercial zone, they're the standards we have, so. Yeah, that's all I want to say right now.
What do we call, so, just for my clarification, we have the RE, right, which is the residential entrepreneurial, is that not considered a mixed use?
That's
But
an
it's not
overlay.
it's not this zone.
No, I understand that, but you
It
said we
goes
didn't
over.
have it,
No,
okay.
we don't have a mixed use.
And what do you call the other end of Montecito?
That's
Manufacturing.
Manufacturing.
East Montecito,
But there are homes over there.
that's manufacturing zone. The residential uses within East Montecito are actually non-conforming, according to
okay.
the zoning ordinance. There
There's no
exists
provision even in manufacturing,
for mixed use.
like if you had residential use, it would revert to R3 or
It would be the
R2.
same standards used in the commercial zone. If you were to do this type of thing with a commercial building with residential, would be, you basically, you use the standards of the commercial zone, which are the ones that we are,
Which
uh,
takes it to
which
the
are
R3.
applicable
Okay.
here in this
Just looking
instance.
for clarification.
Okay, now the south side of Montecito, though, where the self-storage is that just commercial?
Well, that entire East Montecito block is zoned manufacturing. In addition to manufacturing uses that are allowed in that zone, the ordinance also allows any uses in the commercial zone as well. So, so you have actually a larger range of permitted uses there. It's both manufacturing and the uses in the commercial zone. Both apply.
Okay, but residential?
Because
Because I know they got a resident at
Yeah.
the self-storage.
Well, residential is allowed pursuant to the commercial zone. Again, it's commercial and residential,
And then-
not on the ground floor.
Okay, I got it.
Mhm. Yeah, the single-family residential uses there now are basically non-conforming. They're existing non-conforming.
Matt, do you have something?
Yeah, I just agree with what Gina said, that this could be a nice unit, but it needs more work, more thought. The trash enclosure needs to be moved away, need covered parking, need some outdoor landscape area for the residential use. And it is just a sea of concrete there right now, so it just needs to be softened. That's what I think.
Let me say something. I really think that what they're doing with this project really is pretty admirable. I would suggest, and I think everybody's going to make them suggest that they move the trash. I think that, I don't know that they need covered parking. I think the covered parking is kind of moot right where it is right there behind the building. I do think that when they move that trash can, they certainly could put some grass, I don't know, in the closure in there that's going to be some outside space. I don't have a problem with that. And if they did that, I don't see why we couldn't let this thing fly through. The only thing my question would be, are the people going to be so lazy that are using the building as it is that they don't want to walk across the parking lot to dump the trash? Now, I'm like, my goodness, people are going to be driving through that parking lot. It could be a safety factor. I mean, come on, really. You're going to have safety factors everywhere. So to me, the door coming out onto the parking lot, people are going to have to live with it. And hopefully they do.
Well, I think a nice awning or something covering that area would spruce it up to residential. That might be, you might not have to put bollards or something, a physical barrier, but you could put some, sort of, you know, extended awning that comes off of the residential area that gives you sort of a psychological feeling of an outdoor space with some minimal supports, even if it's freestanding. But, I mean, I think the applicant, if he wants to come back and try and make something work, I think any or all these conditions. A covered parking area would be nice, I suppose, along the back, because you could maybe make it contiguous with the patio, but, and then give you more of a, you know, of a sense of coming from the covered area to the residential area. It's all behind the building and hidden. I think, you know, he has a lot of options if he wants to be more creative and spend the money. But, I mean, overall, I mean, I think he's trying to do the right thing for the building, and I think we should be, you know, I wouldn't say like flexible, but sort of within our purview, I think, able to approve within the you know, the use of the two, you know, the commercial versus residential that we have to deal with.
Yeah, I applaud the applicant for coming forward and making it legal, and I hope that there's no perceived penalty associated with that. I hope we do set a good precedent with that, and I think it's a good thing that you're doing. I'm not bothered by the covered parking because I think the cars are going to be back behind that building and no one's going to see them anyway, and I've made lots of comments here about cars, and you can see lots of cars in Sierra Madre, so I don't see that being a big problem. I think the patio is a nice to have if you can make it work. I think, you know, I don't know that it would be a deal breaker for me, but if you could try to do it in an affordable way that would add some value and add something to it. I'd hate to see the avocado tree go because, as Matt said, there's a lot of cement there, and even some green is nice. The only thing that gives me a little pause is if you are excavating there, given the slope, that we used to have this thing that came out of the sky called rain, and in the event that it were ever to come back, the way that slope comes down, you got effectively a waterfall with a turn down the stairs and straight in there. So be careful. I'm speaking from experience. It's with a slope and an excavation and a step, you're going to have a waterfall in the front door. But it may never rain again, and it may not matter. But I'm pretty close to a yes on this, and I hope we can find a compromise that meets some of these needs. And obviously, the trash shouldn't be outside the bedroom. It's probably not a great idea.
I have some concerns with the project. I mean, right off the bat, I do applaud that we're trying to bring this into compliance and provide a residential amenity in the mix of this commercial. I get that. I applaud that, but as it currently sits, I think there's some issues that need to be worked out. I don't see any reason that you couldn't provide the 150 square feet or something in that neighborhood of outdoor patio space that had some green. I think I wouldn't, personally, I wouldn't want to see it where the trash enclosure is. I think that's kind of on the threshold between where the commercial is and the residential. I would be more apt to see it on the back side of the house, not the house, but the residential kind of behind. I don't know what
is.
Well, I think there's an opportunity to carve out some space there, whether it's through sort of an enclosed fence or something. There's actually a fair amount of light that comes in there because the building next door has no fence and it's sort of set back. It's weird, like you've got a really short north setback, but it actually seems wider because there's no fence there, and the neighboring property is the Verizon building's 5 feet back, and it actually notches right there for some weird reason. So I think that would be a more appropriate place, I think, to carve out some sort of private patio area. I'm fine with not having the covered spaces, but I think you could get 2 dedicated spaces in that area that's labeled number 12 on surface. You know, you may have to knock out these curbs for whatever that was going to be there, but I don't think that's a huge deal. With all the concrete that you're breaking up inside, I don't think breaking up a little bit more here is gonna kill you. There may be an opportunity there to, and I just thought about this, but I don't know, is tandem parking allowed as far as for the residential use? I don't think it says you can't.
Yeah, I believed in the R3, I don't believe that it's not allowed. I'd have to confirm it,
I
but
looked
I
into
don't
this,
believe so.
because we were playing with ideas. In R1, tandem is not allowed. It expressly says it's not allowed. In commercial and in R3, it doesn't say if it's allowed or not, but it does say parking has to be, in the commercial zone, meet the diagrams, and there's the diagrams of what a parking lot looks like, and there's not one that has a tandem diagram. So,
Well, my only thinking there was, and I'm kind of riffing here, but in that spot 12, you could get a patio back there, an open space, but it may preclude you potentially from getting two side-by-side spaces on ground.
Right.
So if you could suddenly shift it so you tandem, because what's unusual about the lot is it's sort of an L shape.
yeah.
And you've got enough backup space for your first 11 spots, and then there's sort of this resultant area that you could potentially get maybe two cars behind each other, and then have room to carve out some of this open space
Right.
for this subterranean unit. So that may be something you want to play with or look at, but regardless, in that spot 12, I think there's room to get the two dedicated residential parking spots. I don't think it needs to be covered or enclosed. I think this sort of regular parking, I mean, I would be in favor of seeing this restriped. I mean, I think there's, to Gina's point, I think you could get another spot there, and I know no one wants to see this avocado tree moved or removed, but I mean, I wouldn't have a problem with that going if that would create some regular parking that made sense. And then as far as the entry goes, I mean, that's just, I mean, there's enough, gosh, the front of this building has enough sort of walls, and I think you not plastered, but you kind of re-cemented them and sealed them. And there's enough backup here for these spots. I may be wrong, maybe there isn't, but it's creating some sort of demarcation or something there where you're entering the residential, and, I think that's a valid concern,
Yeah.
someone sneaks out of there, I know it's not a street, and I get that, but I think there's a way to sort of create that demarcation without creating a safety issue for the parking. I think there's just a little creative thinking needs to be put into that.
Say planting or something.
Could be.
With an awning above it, that's what I was thinking, was something an awning that kind of comes out from the front door.
It could be.
That's not gonna help you on kind
low-
of protecting, separating it, but I think it's not a
Could be
bad
low
idea.
plants or something that just sort of give you a visual separation in some way that, because it's, to me, when I went there, I thought, wow, that's just, I mean, I'm not against the idea of having a residential unit in this spot. I think it's kind of cool. I think the sort of mixed use is like, I like it. Conceptually speaking, I'm not against it. But when I looked at it, I thought, wow, that is just a really weird place to have a front door. Right onto the pavement of the parking lot.
It is a safety concern that kids live there.
Yeah, or even they came to visit, I'm not thinking they might not live there, but, someone might bring kids
These
there.
cars are backing out. They're not
And
gonna see-
because that block wall sticks out farther than the front door already, all you have to do is sort of do something that extends that out. See what I'm talking about?
See, that's too bad that, like, if you couldn't take these and set them back even 18 inches or something, 2 feet, you've got this thing coming out, the block wall, you'd almost create something here, like what Gina's suggesting, in line with that, so you entered it from behind that, and it's.
So you're suggesting a structure that would have one corner at the side of the door and one corner where that planter ends?
It's not even a structure. I think what Gina's suggesting is bust this out here and you plant something, or put like a,
It could
a
be
hedgerow
some
or
potted
something,
plants or
it could be a
something, yeah.
landscaped element. I mean,
Yeah.
You know, they make even these products, they're not super successful usually, but like a green screen where it's like a metal screen you can grow over.
Okay, I think, I just want to make sure that, I want to make sure I understand what we're saying here, and I think it could be a working idea. So basically, if that planter were kind of to extend, so in order to get into the residence, instead of coming straight out the door, you kind of have to come around it from the other side.
Yeah.
That would make it, okay, I think I understand.
And because you have this, that's great, I didn't pick that up, but I don't know what the distance is from the door to the outer edge of this planter. It looked like 2 or 3 feet.
Yeah, I was walking up there the
know.
other day, because I was peering in the windows, and it's like
Is
this
it wide enough? Okay, well, if it's wide enough, then it's almost creating something here.
I mean, it could be just sort of like an extension of that sort
I
of
don't know,
low wall or something. Just a
You're not building a structure. I don't think we're asking that.
visual extension.
It's more of a, and it's also a barrier,
Mhm.
kind of separating commercial, residential entry.
Right.
So my question, I'm okay with either answer. I'm going to come back to the drawings. I want to make sure that we're all thinking about the same image, right? So there's two things that I could see. One is a planter that comes out sort of towards you, so you're walking down imagine a planter on the other side that sort of, or you say continue it this way, so I have to walk around the plant. Okay, that makes sense.
Protecting the door.
That makes sense.
Or it could be something that comes out.
It'll keep the water moving down
Here.
too, if it ever.
Yeah. Well, I think it needs to be
Yeah.
like this, so
Yeah.
it protects,
yeah.
and you come in.
And I also think Bill's idea about having an awning or something over the door to kind of separate that is a possibility.
Yeah, if you-
Something to
If you run the wall or something protective to
to
meet their requirement, and then
delineate the
something.
door as a,
almost-
Well, that's,
something.
I mean, it's interesting
upper
because
ledge.
if you look at the roof lines of the
Yeah,
the
they've got that.
residence, I mean, I don't know if this is part of the balcony up here, right? You almost could create something in line with this that came off here.
And it
You know, to
would-
carry that same line.
Right.
It would
I
also
think that-
It would provide a little bit of protection if and when it rains again and you're trying to find your key and
That-
get in the
that
door
rare
and have
occurrence.
20 packages.
So, what we're hearing is
Useful thing.
unanimity on moving the trash enclosure.
Well, I think it has to. You
Um,
just can't have it there.
And this is what happens when you try to design after your architect has moved to Florida. Because that was a late add. and-
This is a cautionary tale.
Yes, this is
Do
a
not
cautionary
design
tale.
without an architect.
There's a bachelor pad. Open the window.
So the, some outdoor patio landscaped area would be, seems like a good add.
Is there the site plan on here, Derek? Can you go back? Sorry, I didn't want to break you off, but I want to talk about that because I actually think this is not a good location to put said patio or outdoor area. Again, I think it's on this commercial sort of front. So I think if there's a way to sort of look at this area.
I'm just wondering, what if you move, those parking those parking spaces are pretty deep, right? That parking.
Well, yeah, it's
I
just.
mean, what if the parking were moved out more, the end of the parking was parallel with the front of the building? And then you had space behind the parking there.
I think you suggested aptly that, given the number of blocks I want to move, tandem parking might be necessary to get all those things in that space. And what I'd request is if I could get some confirmation that I won't come back and be told no on tandem parking, I could kind of try to get all those things in that space, right? But-
Well, I mean.
It's wide enough for two
it's-
cars there, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd have to go, I mean, you need, Leticia, what, the requirement's different on width for parking. It's 9?
Yeah.
So you need 18 feet
I
in width to get
couldn't find
to.
numbers on there.
I didn't measure out
Well, you need,
there,
the
but
thing is, for the ones on the side, you need 2 feet extra. So the interior spaces can be 9 feet, but the ones on the edge need to be 12.
well, no, because, I mean, I know that's because you want to be able to have that back out,
Right.
but because you have such a long distance,
Right.
usually that's typical when you have a double-loaded 24-foot,
Sure.
6-inch aisle. You need that extra 2 feet to kind of do this and
Uh-huh.
then get out. But because you've got, I don't know, 50-some feet maybe from this spot to where your parking would end, you conceivably could come all the way like this and then
Okay.
hammerhead out.
Because the issue with that space that you were pointing out is that's where all the HVAC compressors and whatnot are.
Well, they're
So-
right under the stair here.
You
I
can-
mean, you've got your electrical panels on that wall, they're meters, and I don't know if that's for the whole, I'm assuming it's for the whole building.
The meters are there, and I think the gas is there.
But, I mean, that,
But that, you know.
I would, ideally like to see something here, whether Gina's suggestion, which may not be a bad one, is you have your two spots starting from here to here, two spots level with the building, and then this resultant space back there could be
Well,
left open.
we can play with options. We can look at ones with the front and then some behind, or maybe tandem and then fit in, I don't know. We'll
Tandem, the only problem with tandem, I mean, it's great for saving space, but it's usually a nightmare as far as you wind up playing car,
Well, the thing
you
is,
know,
is if.
roulette,
if our-
basically.
But if our parking requirement is 12, and we have 11, and then we add 2 through tandem, we're just adding, you know, an extra that's not required.
Yeah, but what I would like to see is those two spots that are added behind the building are the dedicated spots for the residential, so it's not sort of like,
What's in that?
you can park here if you're coming to the salon. I think those would be for that, so.
Right, we definitely would reserve them.
So, but in that tandem situation for a residential use, it's usually, I mean, it's a space saver, but you're playing car roulette basically to get in and out. So, I mean, if it's not, Leticia would have to clarify that it doesn't.
I don't see any restrictions in the R3 regarding tandem. The code does not prohibit tandem parking in the R3 zone.
Okay, so,
And
I
then,
mean, you can look at that.
you guys also talked about some sort of visual, if not physical, distinction on the entrance to the residential awnings, other kind of things.
Well, I think the awning goes to that sort of covered protection
Right.
issue, but I think the issue of physical separation, that threshold, I think something needs to be addressed sort of on that.
But I think
Where
that
you
if
enter.
there were some kind of cover, it would also provide a physical separation, a visual separation from the parking lot.
Yes,
too.
but it wouldn't provide
Yeah, it
this
wouldn't provide that, but it
separation
would-
where,
It would reinforce it.
yeah, I think it's a combination there.
And then we heard some interest in covered parking, but
I
maybe
don't
that's
think-
not
I don't
all
think
that
it's-
important.
I don't think it's essential.
I don't think that's essential. I think the dedicated spots on the east end would be more important than that they be carported or enclosed.
And then also we heard some interest in restriping the main parking and losing the avocado tree, but some resistance to that. And
Well, the only reason I think it's a good suggestion is because I think the logical place for this trash enclosure is sort of in one of these stalls, almost. I mean, I think at the very end, and you would, I mean, that's typically how it's seen, or you see it on the end, on the far end, and then the parking, you know, pulls out. So, but I don't know if you're able to put it on the east property line somehow without blocking
yeah.
parking. I don't
Well,
think.
Obviously, if we put it on the south property line, it's best for our building, but I don't know if the property owner to the south is gonna feel the same. So we wanna try to find a place that's best for everyone.
Well,
The other thing is, to the extent we have issues with setback to incorporate a carport or trash enclosure, I'm not sensing there's much issue with setback on the north or east when we're up right against the Verizon building.
I don't think there's-
Like if we're moving the pieces around and that's one of the things that needs to go, that's probably gonna be received well,
That's
Yeah.
okay.
right?
Yeah. I mean, you have an opportunity where if you restriped, you could put, I don't think you can replant this avocado tree. I mean, if it's gone, it's gone, but the potential to have your trash enclosure in the front part of the space, and you can plant something in the resultants part that would be between the south neighbor and the trash enclosure, that could eventually mature into a non-avocado tree that would be great to look at.
there right now.
No, I'm talking on this end, if you put your trash enclosure up here and you had space, so you didn't put it, but,
While we have this image up, I did want to tackle one other issue, which is when you look at the property, you see a sea of concrete. Same thing I saw when I first looked at it. If you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a wedge there with a whole bunch of trees in it. And until the surveyors came out and told me, I too was surprised to find out that those are my trees.
Well, there's your property line.
When you look at it from the street, those trees you think must belong to the Creative Arts Group because it's immediately to the south. So the place isn't quite the sea of concrete it appears, because when you look at it, you think, oh, those trees are, no, those are all those trees on the south are trees associated with this property. And it literally takes a surveyor to show you it's so, but it really is. And I think they even have the trees on the survey there, but to that issue, there are actually a lot of trees on the property.
I mean, if you restripe this, you could get your enclosure here, put a tree here if you wanted.
I mean,
and
the
then-
enclosure wouldn't have to be as wide as a parking spot.
Well, typically for commercial size, if the dumpster's 5, 6 feet wide by 3, the enclosure's usually 8 feet.
So it's close to.
It's
It's a little,
close.
it's
It's
a
a
little
parking
less.
space.
It's a parking space,
Yeah.
but I mean, if you restriped, you can end up with the same number of spots as far as parking, and then the resultant corner here, which you would blank off, would be your trash enclosure and could be some landscaping of some sort, to replace the loss of this guy. But I'm of the mind I'd like to see some of this sort of re-envisioned and looked at, and us to look at it again. I don't think I'm comfortable with just saying, put these on as conditions, to an approval, but
Yeah, I agree.
if others
I
feel
agree.
differently, okay.
Like to see it.
And one other thing, which is that some of these other things which are about setbacks and stuff, that because you're not changing the footprint of the building, I don't think there's an issue with those.
Yeah. I would agree.
The
So-
lot coverage and stuff, it's not really an issue about what we're
Yeah.
talking about.
So it looks like we're of the mind to continue this, and have the applicant come back to a date certain, I would think.
The next available would be the 20th, November 20th.
Is that,
Yes, we'll make November 20th happen.
and I would add, Alan, I don't know, this is just a pet peeve, but if you produce these plans, or but they're they're hard to read.
Well, I was looking for the very best of architects, and I thought hire an architect who'd been on the planning commission, because I hear those are great architects.
I don't know, maybe not, but I don't know.
And then he moved to Florida.
Okay.
But
Well, I don't know if I don't know, I don't think Tom produced I don't know who produced these, but they were, and maybe it's a photocopy, but they're super hard to read.
I can tell you thus far, and there'll have to be a new architect, but the only architect who's touched this project was Tom.
Okay, well.
That's the only guy I've had whose hands have been on it so far.
Okay, well, anyway, so. But does November 20th, right?
20th.
Yep,
Would
make
that
happen?
Make that happen?
What's, when do I need to submit to you?
Yeah, that's usually.
November 3rd or sooner.
Okay.
Preferably sooner, if you can do it the week before, but no later than the 3rd.
Gonna hire an architect tomorrow.
I heard they're out there looking for work, so. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you very much.
Do we need to make a motion to do that, or?
To
To
continue?
continue, or?
Yes.
All right.
I'll move to continue it to a date certain of November 20th.
We get a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Time is it? 9:15. Giants going to the World Series.
Oh, they won, did they?
All right.
What did you say?
I said the Giants are going to the
What
World
was this?
Series.
Oh, did you say what?
Shall we go into the discussion item, or does anyone need a break?
Yeah, let's plow ahead.
Let's plow ahead? Okay, all right. So on to the discussion item for tonight, conditional use permit thresholds for R1 development.
What is before you tonight is the discussion that you requested to be placed on the agenda. As you know, the R1 single-family residential zone currently includes a total floor area threshold beyond which a conditional use permit is required. And that is, as you know, 4,000 square feet of floor area, including the garage, triggers that requirement for a conditional use permit. Due to your concerns with large homes, below the current threshold not being compatible with the neighborhood due to issues of bulk and mass, the commission directed staff to bring this item for discussion of a possible reduction in the threshold that triggers the requirement for a CUP to 3,000 square feet, including garage floor area. Staff, when reviewing plans for plan check, our experience is that when the size of a lot allows construction of more than 3,000 square feet of floor area, the majority of property owners will then exceed the threshold, whether for new construction or additions. As you know, in the R1, the lot size is used to determine the maximum allowable floor area for each parcel. Currently, a minimum lot size of 12,006 square feet is needed to trigger the CUP requirement based on the 4,000 threshold. However, if the CUP threshold were to be reduced to 3,000 square feet, the minimum lot size that could potentially trigger a CUP would then be reduced to 8,574 square feet. That means that the number of CUPs for consideration would be substantially increased, and they will be coming to you for review and consideration. At this point, staff seeks your, basically your direction on this issue.
All right.
So I was the one who asked this to be on the agenda. John Hutt sent us an email about this issue. I guess he's not here still, but he had some ideas about kind of having a limit that varied with the size of the lot, which has some, maybe it has some merits, I don't know. I think that you know, we keep seeing really big houses coming to us continually, that the bulk and massing does not fit with the neighborhood. And I think that most of our neighborhoods do not have houses that are mostly between, that are over 4,000 feet for sure. And a lot of them don't have houses that are over 3,000 feet. I mean, my street sure isn't like that. And I think that there are a lot of neighborhoods in the city that have really small houses. And they sometimes have small houses mixed in with big houses, small lots with big lots. And it's not only just the size of the lot that determines how the bulk fits on it. It also has to do with the shape of the lot, which we have seen on lots of occasions where you have a unusually shaped lot and someone wants to fit their really big house on, so it ends up being very close, squashed into one area, or there's a tree on it that requires you to protect the tree and move the bulk and massing. And so it's not just a number. It's not just a number, it also has to do with shape and height. And so there's many variables involved in this. And it also has to do, I mean, we recently had a house that came, it was on Santa Anita, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That house that came to us, it was over 4,000 feet, and they redesigned it to under 4,000, and it didn't come back. But that house not only was large in square footage, it was also a very high house. It had a great room that was 2 stories high.
I think the lot was over 15,000.
It was over 15,000 feet, but there was you couldn't build on all of it because part of it was low and part of it was really high. And so even so it's called 15,000 feet, in usage, the usable amount of that lot was not 15,000 feet. So that it's more complicated than you might think in terms of just the size of the lot. So, and I know this would make more work for us, and more importantly, it would make more work for the staff. Every CUP takes quite a bit of time, I'm sure, for them, more time than it takes for us. But I think that there's a strong will within this community to restrict the bulk and massing of houses in general, and this is one way to do it.
Yeah. In looking at this, I think there's some merit to this sort of sliding scale theory of CUP that John wrote about in his little email here, that That makes sense rather than a sort of a, this is a cutoff. But I was reading this in preparation. Well, yeah, I don't know, we can talk about that, but I think, I was reading this and trying to get at what's really the issue, and it's the bulk and mass and size of homes on given lots. And I don't think although I think the CUP threshold, which basically puts a barrier or something in front of a prospective property owner to, when they go to develop their house, that if they're going to cross this threshold, they're going to be coming up for review in front of the planning commission. But the real issue is, so it may stop like some of the larger homes in mitigating them going from, you know, like the case on Orange Grove, that house where it was, gosh, that house had more covered patio than my house times 2, but,
Yeah.
you know, they basically came down to 3,999 and did whatever, and it was fine, but.
And then they put 80% of the front yard in pavers
Yeah.
rather than.
Well, that's another discussion.
Yeah.
But I think the real issue here is the criteria that we set for the gross floor area. You know, so that's really the trigger, like, what are you allowed to build given your lot? Not what the threshold is necessarily for it to come up for review and vetting. Not that that's I mean, I think we should have that, and I think we need to look at changing that, but I think the issue is, and so I had one question, which probably is a dumb question, because I'm sure there's a reason, you know, in the R1, regardless of the subzone you're in, it's essentially a 35% lot coverage. You know, when you get into bigger lots, you get 35 up to a point, and then you get 15% of whatever's over. But how did we arrive at 35% lot coverage? How is that set? What's the criteria for that?
I cannot answer that question. The code has been that way for quite a while. I can try to trace it back to when this was first adopted.
I presume someone just decided that that was a good amount, right?
At this
I
point in
also
time, I don't
imagine
know.
we looked around at adjacent standards, right? I mean, we didn't make it up in a vacuum. There are plenty of other municipalities around with municipal codes.
Again, I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah, I'm saying, the number's not
How it
pulled
was
out of the
done.
sky, right?
But to your point, it's not pulled out of the sky.
Yeah.
But the range can be, depending on the geography, the size of lots, type of lots, jurisdiction. In some places where I do a lot of work, you get 50% gross floor area, but then they take stuff away. So it's up to 50%. So the range can be 30 to upwards of 50, but I'm trying to ascertain if there was any reasoning for that, because.
I don't think there's any more reason for that than why
Then
we
it's been
picked
in the code.
4,000 feet versus
Yeah.
3,900 square feet versus 4,100 square
So-
feet. You picked a number, and the
Okay.
number's been in the code for however many years it's been in the code.
So I suspected that it's just kind of something we've inherited and it's been that way, or there was reason back in time.
May have been
and
carried
that-
over.
And
you
it's
know,
carried over.
From a long time ago. I'm not sure. I can try and determine when that was adopted. I can attempt to do that.
So I feel like that,
You know,
that's really the elephant in the room, like that, we need to look at what do we allow to be built on lots? And especially since we break down lots into subzones, so there's R1, but there's R1 if your lot's 7,500 square feet, there's R1 9,000, well, I think it goes from 6 to 11, and then 11 up. But you've got your R19s, R111s, R115. So what, and in all cases, you're allowed to build 35% of the lot. Except for when you get down to the low end of the lot size, right? So, you know, now it's kind of this diagram I passed out, but I just did this really quickly, more for me to study it visually. But I noticed that when you get down to lots that are 7,500 and below, you're basically allowed the same size house. But you can imagine the dark box on the red background gets bigger in terms of the size of the lot. So I think there's actually a problem moving down in that way, because.
Well, but you're assuming that that's a one-story house, right?
Well, worst case.
Okay, but I'm
assuming
saying
worst
is that
case.
you
And
you
even
could
the
have a
setbacks.
2,100 square foot
Yeah, you
home that was half that
And
footprint.
you could do that here
Yeah.
too, but I'm assuming the worst,
Understand.
if you did.
Biggest.
But again,
the-
you're looking
the
at
biggest
another
footprint.
variable though, right? There's
True.
another
And I'm
variable
not
that you're
saying
talking
this
about.
covers all variables, but my point being is I think what I was trying to ascertain is, okay, it looks like the houses are getting larger as the lot sizes decrease. And we kind of say right off the bat in R1 that your minimum lot size is 7,500, but I know for a fact that that's
We just looked at what there was.
That's new lots.
tons
That's
of
new
lots that
lots.
are.
That's new lots.
Gosh, I don't know, there might be some lots that are, and I know we're not picking on this end of the spectrum, but 3,000, I mean, there's some, I've seen some lots that are like less than 3,000. Okay, there you go, so, but the point being is, we kind of just say 7,500 square feet and up, and then kind of, we don't necessarily deal with lots that, I think a majority of the lots are.
There are a fair number of 5,000-foot lots in
Yeah,
town.
okay. But I think the real issue is, what do we allow the gross floor area to be, which is basically, how much can you build on your lot, based on your lot size? And I think that's the key factor, because everything starts from there, whether it's, we have setbacks, the angle planes, all these other things to reduce size or appearance of homes, but I think it starts with, you can build X amount of square feet.
I mean, I think
Yeah.
as the lots get really small, the amount you can build gets to be less because of the setback requirements, doesn't it?
Not really, because
We've
once you
seen
get
some
down to
that are that
5,000, this is an example, the smallest lot, it's 5 feet is your side yard setbacks. Your front, I assume they're all pretty much 25 feet. I don't know if we have prevailing anywhere, but.
We
You
do
might
have prevailing as well, but generally speaking, somewhere between 35. to
Prevailing's a
45.
weird thing, like somehow when you do the math, it still adds up to 25 feet. I've tried it numerous times and it's still 25 feet, I don't know. But if you take all your setbacks, you did get a larger and larger appearing house on the smaller lot, because once it gets below 6,000, according to the code, you're allowed.
You're still allowed 2,100.
Yeah, yeah.
And
yeah.
maybe I've always thought that was a bit weird, personally.
So,
But see, you've got other variables in play. That's why, it's not just a blunt instrument, right?
I'm looking
how-
at the worst case.
I understand, but you don't know, what if this lot is on a slope and half of it is not buildable? The question is not just, the question is,
Yes.
what's the pad, what's the buildable pad, is it 1 story, is it 2 story? There's
But-
multiple things
Exactly,
that
that's-
coming into play.
You're making a great point. I think those things need to be discussed as well.
Well,
like-
then that's a rewrite to the municipal code.
Well,
And you're
hey.
talking about going
Yes,
back.
well-
Well, I'm saying, but that's not,
This is good, and I think the discussion to say we need to create some sort of, not a one-size-fits-all CUP threshold. I think being mindful of, we don't want every project essentially to come before the planning commission, and thus development services are, as far as preparing. So I get that, there's gotta be some balance, but that's not really, Gina, when you brought this up, the point was, we have this threshold, but it's because of what seems to be larger and larger homes being built.
Yeah, it's like
Okay.
too high. I mean, I think the
Right?
threshold is too high, that the
The threshold's
houses are being built that are too big for the street they're being built
Okay.
on. That's the issue.
I think another problem we have in town, though, is we have people now, developers are basically driving around town going, wow, is that lot big enough to split? And they're basically offering to buy somebody's house just so they can split the lot.
But that's not happening right now, so. For
Yeah, I
2
mean,
years,
that
there's
is-
a moot point. They can't split a lot, because they can't get
Well,
enough water.
They could split it, but they just can't build on it for
They
2
can't
years.
build
But
on
I think that's something maybe we need to look at too. What's the minimum size that
To
you can
create a
split a
new
lot
lot.
at?
Well, currently it would be
7,500
7,500 square
feet.
feet.
Well, do we need to up that? To me, the nice thing about Sierra Madre is you drive down some streets and you have some beautiful houses with big lots. I'd kind of like to keep them that way,
Yeah. And when they split the lot, they make it a flag lot or
Yeah.
something odd where the driveway's gotta go.
They're
It's-
often
it's-
very peculiar.
Yeah, yeah.
These split lots often are weird.
Those weird driveways. You see that one on Sunnyside? That house that was like this little tiny thing and they stuck a new roof on it. Now, it looks gigantic, but it looks like they got a driveway coming in. the front yard where they used to have the garage in the back one?
I don't know about that, I haven't seen it.
It's on Sunnyside, on the east side of the street.
Kevin, you gotta write down the addresses when you see
Before,
it.
before, it's, I think it's below Montecito. It's a corner lot. I think it's on Montecito and Sunnyside right there. It was a little tiny, it looked like a little tiny house covered up with all these bushes and stuff.
Oh, no.
They went out and they put a new roof on it, and I don't know what else they did, but the place looks huge now, and they tore out the whole front yard. Looks like they're putting a driveway, they put an apron in, driveway coming in the front yard. But, looks like it doesn't go out anywhere. So they can park cars on the pad in the front yard.
Yeah, that was an auction house that had, that's a big lot, though. That's a very large lot.
They have been advised that that is not parking. And that is actually access for a disabled member of the family, actually, to get to the front door. That is why they did this driveway that you're referring to. And they have been told that they're not allowed to use it as parking,
All right, well,
just to provide some.
Well, I kind of agree, though, it's sort of a bigger topic if you want to turn it into that, but just cutting the threshold down doesn't make sense. I think John says in his letter, it becomes like almost every project on these fairly decent-sized lots is going to come to us because people are going to try to maximize.
I'm not sure I agree with that argument, actually.
Well,
Just gonna try to
I think it pushes it
Make
down.
that argument, but I don't really necessarily believe it.
Well, I just think it'd be, there's room for a larger discussion if we want to, like, really modify the municipal code rather than just sort of arbitrarily just say, let's cut it down to 3,000 feet. I think it's limiting people too much on things that they should be able to do, but not necessarily going to get to do, you know, and, I mean, I don't know if I want to look at a house. I mean, the house up on the thing with the split level is a bad example, because you're right, they went under, sounds like they went under 4,000 square feet, and they sort of kept their Tudor-style roof and all that kind of stuff that seems like would never get past this, but, you know, at the same time, you're still asking people, like, well, if I've got a lot that I spent a lot of money on getting and want to be able to get what I want out of it, I mean, we have some bad examples of that, but I mean, there are some people that would do some tasteful things, and I think that might limit them too, or they end up being forced to come before the planning commission, which, you know, might be, I think is kind of unreasonable in some respects, or at least that number sounds unreasonable, and I think it's a larger discussion. And
I think the legal test has to be the municipal code. If we don't like what's happening with the municipal code, then we need to look at it. And if that's something we want to open up, then we can open that up, but it's gonna be like, you know, you push it a little this way, it moves this way. Like I said, it's not just the number of square feet on the size of land. It gets, particularly look at what we've been going through with the Carter project. Every piece of land up there is different, and some have a slope, and should you include that, should you not include that? Should it be a
The reason
percent
we're
of it?
dealing with that is because basically in the agreement says you can build up to this size, no matter what the pad is.
yeah, that's another
So it's
variable.
like-
I'm saying is that it's not just the number of square feet.
But to your
It's not
point,
the
I
number
think-
of square
I think we
feet.
do need to tackle, if we're trying to tackle what your original suggestion is, I don't think just looking at the CUP and where we come in to review it is gonna get
Yeah.
to the
Well, I mean, I
point.
think
The heart of it is looking at what do we allow gross floor area to be?
And I think, I mean, one of the things about what John has said here was sort of basing it on the size of the zone. And I think it needs to be based on the size of the lot as well, you know. So, I mean, you can have a small lot you can have a, 5,000-foot lot in a R11 zone or something. This happens all over town. And so, the fact that it's in a zone that allows bigger or requires bigger lots now doesn't mean that there aren't pre-existing non-conforming lots of every size in every zone all over town, because a lot of the lots are really old.
But to that point, what governs in those cases isn't the zone designation, right? It's the size of the lot.
Well, I mean, that's
Right.
how I think it
That is
needs.
correct.
to
Currently,
I mean,
be.
you're not gonna
that's
call a
ours.
zone, a 6,000 square foot lot is not called an R115. It's
Well,
an R1.
Well, no, but it's in a R115 zone.
Is that even?
Well,
That's a zone.
it is, for purposes of creating new lots. If you are creating new lots, then your minimum, what that does is designates the minimum lot size
Right. I mean,
on
it's
the
not-
zone
it's not
itself.
really- It's not really an appropriate designation for how you evaluate lots that are already existing. So you might
And-
just do it by the size of the existing lot.
And that's how it's actually done. I mean, that
Yeah,
table
not
on
by that- not by-
17, 21, 25 is based on lot size, regardless of whether it's R1,
Mhm.
9,000, 11,000, 15, or 7,500.
But I mean, I have seen some lots that are really small ones where they have shoehorned on a pretty big two-story house onto this rinky little lot that looks equally oversized for that lot is a 5,000 square foot house looks on a, 10,000 square foot.
Yeah.
There is a proportionality, like the house we looked at today on Merrill. Those were all kind of little, small, one-story houses.
In the R, in,
On
it's
small
an
lots.
R3, and they could
Small.
actually get, but that's R3.
So I mean, it's sort of a funny thing, but.
That's its own quirk,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
but.
its own quirky thing, but,
I mean, I think this solution here is I was thinking the same thing as in terms of a sliding scale
I just think this
approach.
scale needs to slide a little lower at the top.
See, I actually think,
Maybe at the bottom, I mean, maybe.
I mean, this is my thinking. If there's an R1 lot that's 7,500 square feet, based on the code, you're allowed to build a 2,625 square foot home, I think inclusive of the garage, right? Right?
Mm-hmm.
That includes
The garage. So the house is somewhere in the 2,200 square foot with a 400 square foot garage. But.
And actually, that could include various things. It could include a covered patio. It could include decks that are over 7.5 from grade, because that is the definition of gross floor area, as you recall.
All of those
when-
items.
Correct. Sometimes it's not just garage, it's anything that's covered by solid roof on the property.
But, I mean, yeah, okay, so, again, there's more variables, but worst case scenario, like, in the most simplistic sense, you have a garage and a house.
Yes,
You know?
correct.
Garage, it's gonna be a two-car garage minimum, so it's gonna be somewhere in the 400 square feet range. So you're looking at a house where people live that's 2,200 square feet. So we're saying potentially, and I'm using your chart as an example, but, that if we adopted something like this, that at 2,400 square feet, if they want to exceed that, and the most they could exceed it to would be 2,600 square
Mhm.
feet, that for that 200 square feet, we're saying, come before us, go for a CUP, do your hearing, do all that, like, to me, that doesn't have the same weight as when we look at a home that's, like the Orange Grove one, because I think it was like 5,400 or something with ginormous number of decks, and there was a lot of square footage in play, so that CUP made a lot of sense, because they were basically asking for, because of covered porches and all this, something that was in the 5,400 square foot range, and their cutoff was 4,000,
So,
But I think on the smaller end, it just creates.
That was also before we counted the garage too, because we added that back in. So when he came in, it was 5,400 net of the garage.
Yeah, and it was a 3-car, it was 600, anyway, yeah, it was crazy. But the point being, on the low end of this sliding scale, I don't know how much, and I'm just talking this through, I don't know how much benefit there is, like, you're basically fighting over 200 square feet
Yeah.
on a 7,500 square foot lot. So,
Mhm.
I know that's boiling it down maybe to its simplistic level, but when you're looking at, houses that could be almost.
4,000 right now is a gut check, right? All it's basically saying is, if it's 4,000, we want to see it. We think that's large.
If it exceeds it.
That's what it is right now. It's just a gut check. That's all it is. It says if you want to go 4,000, people got to look at it.
But it's a net too, that if we lower that, if we basically can widen the net so it captures more projects. You know what I mean? Your gut check.
Well, I'm just saying
basically-
what you have now is that. That's what you have.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So you have a chance to review, so a house comes in, that's over 4,000 square feet. We have some lots in Sierra Madre where a house of that size is fine. I mean, it's a really big lot, it's a really big house, there's plenty of, there's plenty of setbacks all around, it fits.
Like the
it's in an
project on
area.
Rancho.
We've seen houses, I've seen houses like that before, and I'm like, it's a big house, it's a big lot, it fits with the neighborhood. But you can also have a really big house like that, that's in a neighborhood where the lot isn't as big as that, the house is 4,000 square feet, and it totally it out bulks everything else in that area. And there's a lot of areas where there aren't any houses that are 4,000 square feet, there aren't any houses that are probably 3,000 square feet. That all the houses in that area are a lot smaller. They may be, 2,500, 2,000, who knows what. There's a lot of areas like that in Sierra Madre, where someone comes in, currently, comes in with a 3,750 square foot house. They can just build it there as much as it does not fit with the bulk and massing and what's around, right? And there's plenty of Sierra Madre that's like it, and that's what I'm thinking of capturing.
Because what we want to do is we want to keep a neighborhood.
Yeah, and I think there are areas where it's fine, but there's a lot of areas where it's not fine, where it doesn't fit with that neighborhood. It's totally this kind of Arcadiaization of taking really big houses compared to the area. I mean, it's like, we all got this letter from the monastery people who said, we're not building big houses, they're only gonna be 3,800 square feet. And I'm like, well, for most of Sierra Madre, that's a really big house.
We've heard this before.
Yeah.
But the modern
I didn't get a letter.
5 bedrooms and 5.5 baths.
But,
So-
I mean,
so
I
that
get what
think
you're
that There's a
saying.
lot of, there's
Yeah.
quite a large area where a 4,000 square foot does not fit with the area. And I think that, and it may fit on some lots, but it doesn't fit on other lots. And I think that's why, if we have an extra layer of being able to look at it, because there's so much variation in our community and in how the lots are, because on some lots it's fine, on some lots it's not fine.
But that's what I'm getting,
That's
to
what-
me, I agree with you, but I'm wondering, like, at some end on the lower end of the spectrum, it's like diminishing returns for
Mhm.
the effort and everything that
Right.
everyone's gonna put in.
And I think I'm open to
I think
coming up with something.
that higher
that
end,
makes-
definitely, I think we should be looking at that.
And I think that 4,000 is too high for a lot of the lots in there.
Yeah.
A lot of the areas where you could, I just think it's too high. I think, and people, these things get built and people are really PO'd. They're like, wow, that totally doesn't fit. It's
Should we let
because
the
it's too
public,
tall, it's too
Mr.
big.
Chairman, should we let the
Yeah,
public chime in?
I was gonna open
Especially
it up.
since John's here, we've been
Yeah,
talking about his
let
letter.
him go, yeah, all right, come on up. Open it up to public.
Matthew Bryant, Edgeview Drive. Yeah, I just want to say that, I would think that the biggest threat to changing the character of Sierra Madre is going to come in the R1 zone. And we look no further than Arcadia. And those kind of development pressures, there's no question in my mind, they're coming to Sierra Madre and they're only going to get worse. And now's the time to try to control that. And I think lowering the threshold from the current 4,000 square feet is definitely a good idea. And when I came here originally, I was kind of focused on, okay, if 4,000 is bad, let's make it 3,500 or let's make it 3,000. But then I did read Mr. Hutt's very thoughtful analysis, and I would tend to agree that I think some kind of a sliding scale would be a good idea. So if you have a smaller lot, the threshold is going to be lower. If you have a larger lot, the threshold is going to be higher. So I think that's going to be good. If there's any concern here about overburdening the Planning Commission with additional CUPs, one of the things that was discussed at the last city council meeting that they're going to incorporate into the general plan is that there's going to be a design review process. And I think right now the Planning Commission is assuming that role, I believe, but maybe that's going to take a little bit of a burden away from the Planning Commission. But regardless, I think it's certainly necessary to have that additional scrutiny. Now, we would advocate one more thing, and that would be to have a CUP for every single second-story home, whether it's a second-story addition or a new home that has a second story, because I think a second-story home has the potential to have the biggest adverse impact on the neighbors. And I think the neighbors should have the opportunity to come in, state why they don't think it's a good idea. I also think that there should be some teeth to what the general plan talks about in relation to preserving views. And so I think a view ordinance would be a good idea also. but I think the neighbors would have that opportunity to come in and express their concerns about oversized homes. Now, Mr. Hutt mentions that these thresholds to trigger the CUP should be tied to the subzones. The only problem with that is, again, at the last city council meeting, those subzones are going to change fairly dramatically. The city council had recommended the city staff to put in some language in the general plan that's going to discourage lot splits. And that's going to be translated, I believe, into the municipal code. We're going to raise all these thresholds up. So the minimum lot size is not going to be 7,500. It's probably going to be 10,000. And all those other lot sizes, whether it's the R19 or R111 or R115, are also going to be raised up in a corresponding manner to discourage the lot splits there. So, I mean, I think it's a fairly complicated issue. I think the chairman mentions that, I mean, if you really want to strike at the heart of preventing McMansions, lowering the allowable floor area. That's certainly one way to do it too. I think maybe a combination approach. But the CUP threshold, we believe, definitely should be lowered. You know, whether it's 3,500 or 3,000, but then make it also automatic for any two-story home or addition. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Barry Gold, live at 441 Ramona Avenue. I believe, as Mr. Bryant does, who just spoke to you, the purpose of having the threshold to begin with, which is now 4,000 feet, as I understand it, is to give this commission the opportunity to look at the design of those houses that would be that big, to make sure that their profiles, their bulk and mass, as you say, is such that they blend into the surrounding community, do not stick out. Okay. And to my way of thinking, 3,500 is a more realistic number, because a 3,500 square foot house could easily stick out. Whether it was on an 8,000 square foot lot or an 18,000 square foot lot, it doesn't matter to me, because a house that's 3,500 feet can be designed, even on the smaller lot, to have a low profile and look very nice. It could also be designed to be tall and ugly and stand out and not be desirable. So I think that having homes that are, like Mr. Bryan said, a second story, no matter what their size, and over 3,500 square feet, which I believe is a good number, okay, for those homes to come before this commission, so you can take a quick look at them and say, these are not going to be ugly to look at, and they're going to be nice, and they're going to satisfy all the other codes anyway, fine. But just to give you that chance to take a look at those houses, 3,500 square foot houses can look pretty bad. 3,200 square foot houses on Camillo look terrible, those two that are going up now. So, thank you.
Hi, John Hutt. I think the fundamental problem, as you guys have talked about a lot, is our R1 code is just no good. I mean, it is archaic. It hasn't been improved. It doesn't have appropriate design guidelines at all. It's a mess. But overhauling that is a huge task, one that I think we actually need to do. And I think that one of the things that I've seen politically in town is we start talking about things that are good ideas to fix, and then we start saying, and this would be good to fix, and this one, and then we lump them in a giant ball, and then it seems so overwhelming it never happens. We talked in the thing for Allen's about the mixed use on Montecito. That is designated in the general plan as artisan mixed use, but it's still zoned industrial because we could never figure out how to change the zoning. And the last time we got pretty close, someone decided it would be a great idea to lump it in with downtown and do a giant specific plan. And we were this close to getting a zoning code worked just for Montecito. So I think that what we really need to do is look at each item, try to do the best we can with it. I think that the numbers on total gross area are too big, just across the board. They're especially too big at the bottom, as you were saying, because we do have a lot of weird remnant little lots.
Mhm.
What we need is a special code provision for dealing with little lots. And that's one of the things I've advocated for a long time. There are things that just don't work on a little lot the way they do on a big lot. And then, people struggle to do things. And there's parts that that requirements for big lots that you'd happily give up if you could get something back. But there's no ability in the code to do that. So those are sort of long-term thoughts, though. You've got before you an idea of lowering the threshold, and I think it's a great idea. I think that especially while you have the moratorium in place, maybe we can drop that threshold down. I think a sliding scale makes more sense than one straight number, but you got to figure that out.
But when you talked about the sliding scale, it raised the question in my mind, which was the lower end of the spectrum.
Mhm.
That whole thought, and I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I'd love to hear kind of on the lower end, you're basically bringing folks in for very little square footage.
That's at the minimum lot size. I mean, most of the town is R1, has a minimum of 7,500, but there's a lot of big lots in that. To me, the subzone more talks about the neighborhood, and some of those lots are weirdly shaped, like we talked about, where you have sort of a 7,500 square feet lot, boom, 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 and then you got one that has the same front that goes in back, right? And so that is maybe 15,000 square foot lot, but it's in the R1 where the minimum is 7,500. And if you thought about, I can build 15,000 square feet, I can build 4,450, right? So let's say you said, okay, I don't want to do a CUP, so I'm going to go 3,999. And they could build that without any review, but on the street frontage, it's going to be in line with a bunch of other houses that are more typical to a 7,500. So I think if you want to have a trigger that's based on the individual lot size, that should be in addition to one that's based on the zoning. Because the fear I have is where you have larger lots in smaller subzones that are strangely shaped, people could go and build there,
But
then subdivide, even worse. After they built the 3,900, McMansion, then they subdivide, pre-existing non-conforming,
Yeah.
and do that other one. So I think,
But in that example right there, isn't in both instances let's say the 3 lots that are 7,500 and then the crazy flag lot that's 15, what they can build is still governed by, regardless of the zone designation, and I'm asking for correction if I'm wrong, but is still based on the lot area.
it's based on the lot area, that's right.
Regardless, right?
Regardless.
Regardless of what we call it.
Regardless of what we call it.
Okay, so if on the 15,000 square foot lot, I totally see what you're saying. I mean, like, you can build a 4 or 5, whatever it is, and that, definitely, that threshold needs to be lowered so that we're reviewing that at a much smaller threshold. But for like the 3 lots that are on the same street that are 7,500, and they want to build a house that I guess the maximum they could build would be 2625, right, currently.
Right.
And we're saying, let's have a suggested CUP cutoff on this sliding scale of 2,400, which is 90%, which I like that, but the point being is like,
Well, effectively, what you're
it's
going to do...
effectively like we're creating all of this sort of,
No, but effectively what you're going to do is you're just going to lower the gross floor area.
that's
No
what we
one is
should
gonna-
do in that case.
Yeah, well, but that's effectively what you're going to do, right? Because no one who has that lot, well, maybe if they're a homeowner and they've got some architectural design that they really, really care about, but if they're just a profit maximizing developer who doesn't care about town, that's the bad example that we want to plan for, right? They're just going to build a 2,400 square foot house. They're not going to even worry about the CUP. Really what that's more about is if you're in an R1 neighborhood and you have one of those bigger lots that you could build, say, a 3,000 square foot house, which in that neighborhood would look big. There's one house that's going up almost finished on Lima, which I drive, to come down here every day, that just looks big. And I'm sure it's nowhere near 4,000 square feet, but it's got all these little houses by it.
Well, that's
Yeah,
part of
but I
the
mean, but
effect
that
of the
could
lower.
definitely- That could be in a zone that's not, you know, a R1. It could be, you know, zoned for bigger lots and all the houses are smaller.
Well-
So there needs to be a way to capture that.
Right,
you
and-
know?
and I think, you
that's
know,
the
if you
other side.
had-
I mean, I see your side, but there's this other side.
Well, have
which
both.
is-
Have both, and say, if you fail either one, you have to do a CUP. It's that, doing that math calculation is not that hard. I mean, it's not super complicated.
That's an interesting point. I didn't think about the fact, you're saying, either based on experience or just kind of, that if, depending on what frame of mind the owner of the lot is, if it's an owner of the lot who wants to build their dream home or whatever, and every square foot, you know, they're gonna try to go to 26, 25. But in a developer-driven sort of scenario, that they're not even gonna bother with the CUP.
Not in that example, no. Why?
And so in that example, you're actually have effectively knocked the square footage down of the house by 200, in this
Sure.
case, 225
No,
square
it
feet.
becomes more of an issue where you have, you know, the lot that's 10,000 or more, and where it's a big issue, and then you have to review. But I think what you're saying too, Gina, makes sense, that if you have the small lot in an R115, I don't think we have any of those. I think pretty much R115 is all bigger lots,
You
but.
might have a small lot in.
But you might have a small lot in R111 or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe you'd want to review that too. So maybe you have both, and if you fail either one, you get a CUP. And keep in mind, even with the water moratorium, if you have a small house, you can demo the whole
Add
thing
on.
and rebuild. So we're still going to see that. But I think this is a good interim measure. It's a good thing we should do. But like you said, we can't stop here. We've got to fix the
Well,
code. And
I think the bigger issue is the gross floor area. I think you gotta, if your goal is to knock down sizes of homes regardless of the lot, across the board, on a sliding scale, you gotta go back and say, you're allowed X amount, you know, and that number, that's why apparently the 35% is something that we've inherited from
and
some
I've
reason,
seen
so.
similar numbers in other cities and different numbers.
It varies,
and-
it
and
varies.
that's- Those numbers, they don't have to come from scientific study.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, but I think
I
it needs
have
to
far
come
less
from, it needs to
faith in-
come from what we think.
Needs to come from what you think is a reasonable size.
For the
house
size of the
For
lot.
the size of the lot. That's what it's about, you
Right.
know, so that if you have a,
Do you
you
think,
know, obviously,
But
if you-
I
the
think if
bigger
you
the
look
lot,
at
the bigger the house.
The
up will
hillside code, and compare it to the R1 code,
Mhm.
you know, the hillside code, number one has much lower floor area allowed.
Percent is percent based,
You
though.
just can't build big as a house there as you can in R1. And when we adopted that, you should have heard the people that come down to this podium and scream bloody murder that we were stealing their inheritance, and that if we don't pay their mortgage, we can't do it. And we were talking, I think it's like 10 or 20% less. I mean, it's not, you know, it's not like tiny houses, but so there's lower floor area. There's also a lot more designs about this, not this, you know, what they should look like, how they accommodate, and that kind of stuff I think is really important. Here, a CUP triggers 3 findings. You know, that's it. So it's useful, and I think we should lower it, but really, it's like Ken was saying, all it is a gut check, you know?
do you think that it would also apply in the R3? I mean, to expand it, because, you know, there's a couple of places right uptown that, you know, everybody squawked about and hit me up about, like, how'd you approve that? I go, we didn't look at it. And it
In
was-
R3?
That's
Yeah,
a whole different calculation, though. It's
Right, but
unit
I'm just
size.
saying that there are some ugly things that are 2 stories on really small lots in the R3 that were, you know.
Well, I think
complained about.
if people do
Or I
R1
shouldn't say
and
ugly,
R3,
according
it
to the people who
follows
complained.
R1 code,
Yeah.
so that you'd have the same CUP cutoff. I know in the general plan update, we put in floor area limits into R2 and R3. We don't have any now. I mean, the city doesn't have any, so it's all just based on setbacks and height. And you can build theoretically up to the full amount of your setbacks and your height. So that was one of the things in R2 and R3 that we were concerned with. We put those restrictions in.
And they may have slipped under the approval, correct? Those 2 that are off Baldwin? The ones that are off of Victoria Lane, I think they are?
Oh, you're talking, yeah. I don't know how that one worked.
Well, regardless, I'm just saying, if you know, because some of the things,
Tore that one house down?
yeah, there was 2,
Put the 2 up?
yes.
I'm not
One
sure
was
which
on-
one you're talking
it was like
about.
a block and a half or something.
But, I
Any
mean.
other questions?
That's, yeah, no, I'm just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thanks.
Just that, I always appreciate your thoughtful comments on things, even if I don't always agree with them. It's always nice to have your input, because you really
Well, I
think
love to
things
make
through
memos
in-
with charts.
In a way
Noticed
that,
that, yeah.
in a way that not that many people come to us with these really intelligently thought out, written.
Well,
things that
I, you know,
are always a good thing for us.
It seemed
for
to me
us
that the whole stepwise thing sort of intuitively made sense, and I know the city council talked about it at their last meeting. And then I thought, I actually just get a spreadsheet and started playing with numbers, and the 10% reduction thing sort of stood out to me, and maybe that's where they got the 4,000.
Mhm.
But it makes sense to me that if that is an appropriate measure for a 15,000 square foot lot, why are we letting people jam things that are relatively just as big on a smaller lot? That seems problematic to me.
At the lower end. On this sort of scale that you have, though, you wouldn't, I mean, I know you're tracking with sort of the subzones, but it doesn't sort of, I mean, why don't we carry that sliding scale all the way down to whatever, below that even?
Well, that's the zones. You know, there's not any smaller zone. I mean, Canyon is its
Well,
own
no,
beast, right? But
we have a lot of R1 lots that are
Way small.
smaller than 7,500 square feet.
I mean,
right,
you could
and that's why I
just
said
say
maybe it makes
if the
sense to
lot is
have
5,000 or less, then you
to
get
have a
different
zoning
number.
trigger and a lot size trigger. So you have one that says, you know, if you're in the R1 subzone, anything over 2,400 square feet, or a percentage of your lot size, and that way you'd catch both. I mean, this would by just based on the zoning, you'd catch the strange large lot that's in with the small houses,
Okay.
right? But if you did the one that's based on the lot size, you'd have the really small lot that's a lot smaller than its zoning, where they're trying to fill it up to the maximum.
Yeah, yeah.
But that trigger would be the percent of the lot, what you can build on it for, like, let's say it's a 5,000 square foot lot, you know, which doesn't fall, currently, you actually end up with more than 35% because you're allowed
Right,
2,100.
anything under 6,000
You're
is
allowed
more than
the same.
35.
Where did that number come from? 2,100? Why does that number?
What's
exist?
35% of 6,000?
Yeah, but I mean, if you have a smaller lot, why are you allowed to build a 2,100
You
square
know,
foot house?
my
on anything?
house is 1,670 square feet, 3-bedroom, right? It's sort of standard 3-bedroom size. Add the 400 square foot garage, you're almost at 21. I think the thing is, they probably thought, well, people should be able to build a 3-bedroom house. That's what's our sort of standard bread and butter house. and that's what it is. It seems crazy to me, because if you have a 3,000 square foot lot, I don't see why
way
you
too
should be
big.
doing that.
And I think
Well, but that's, we don't talk about that because this is based on about, the 7,500 comes in for new
Right.
lot subdivision, but we don't talk about the
Tear
existing
down-
stock.
People tear down things and build, you know, relatively humongous things all the time, and there's more and more of that, and I think it's what happened to Arcadia. I was talking to a person today at lunch who lives in this area that used to be, you know, probably 1,600 square foot houses, and now it's all gigantic things, all within the zoning, but all on these, you know, it's just completely changed the character of the neighborhood where she's lived for decades, right? And that's coming our way. And I think that that's what this discussion is all about, because we're seeing more and more of that.
I mean, at a minimum, I think for these lower end lots, it should still track with the same logic, which is,
Percentage.
I don't know if I agree with the 35%, but that's what we have right now, and that's pretty much across the board, right? So I don't see why our allowable gross floor area, and in conjunction, this, the CUP threshold doesn't continue to track
Mhm.
downward,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, I don't know what you can, I
Well,
know
our
of
minimum-
lots
our
that are like
minimum-
3,000 square feet, but
minimum
like on
size-
Victoria, I think, and there's some small streets that have those, but I don't know percentage-wise how.
I mean, our
if it's
minimum
okay.
size house, we just talked about, it was 1,250, right?
Yeah.
So that even though that's the minimum required, everyone's allowed to build a bigger house than that.
2,100,
Yeah, which is double the size practically, you know?
close. I mean,
So
obviously you got a
that's just kinda
garage.
weird.
so-
That's just really weird, and I remember there was an open house for a house, and I went in, and it was shoehorned into this place, and they had built the garage, on the first floor in the front, and there was no room left on the first floor for like a living room. It was like this little pocket of it was just like this very strange design, but they got those, they squeezed it in there.
Is that 1250 based on like the smallest lot? Like, how did that even come about?
It'd be a little bit under 5,000 square
Again,
feet.
I don't know. That's something that's been there. It wasn't something that you added through
Lot.
your amendments, but.
Well, if you took a
Yeah,
5,000
that's what I
square
was
foot
just
lot.
doing the math.
Yeah, if you did the 5,000 square foot lot and held it to the 35%, that's 1,750. If you take out 400 for the garage, you get 1,350, so you're pretty close to the minimum.
Well, that's like my house. There you go.
I think it's interesting because, there's some, around, nowadays, everyone wants to build these really big houses, but there's this other movement on the other end of the scale where people are building these little mini places,
You've seen that show? You've been watching Tiny House Nation, right?
No, I haven't, but I've read about it in magazines and stuff, and I just think that we have some lots that deserve tiny houses. There are lots in Sierra Madre that deserve a house way less than what we're allowing.
So,
Along with great big lots that deserve a house that's much less than what we're allowing. And I just think, in a way to capture this so that we maintain the character of Sierra Madre that we all love, is we're going at. And this is one way to do it, and changing the maximum you could build is another way to do it, and there's no reason why we can't address it both ways, but this was a place to start, because it's kind of a fairly, to me, an easy change to make, to think about, what has to get reviewed, because, like I said before, there are some which are fine,
So how do we, because, I'm coming around to this sliding scale thing. I mean, I think we'll be kind of dickering over small square footage on the lower end, but yeah, I think there's some good points there. So how do we address, because one concern I have is from development services, like, I mean, what does this impact place on you guys when you're preparing this? I mean, especially if we carry it down to like, I don't know, 5,000 square foot, I don't know how low we can go, but, at some point the wheels fall off the cart and just kind of.
It would be a lot less work for the staff if we just lowered the maximum area that's allowed, because then they just wouldn't come in. I mean, they just wouldn't happen. There'd be a lower, I mean, you'd still get some, but.
Well, I would be a
accomplish
proponent.
it would accomplish the same thing and not put as big a burden on this commission and the staff and whatever.
Well, I'd argue it accomplish that feat more effectively, because it basically is saying,
No.
this is what you can build.
Yeah,
Right.
and I think you still need a maximum, because people still are gonna come in for CUPs.
Yeah, I agree,
But-
but I'm trying to
but I-
think, like, if we extended this to like 3,500 square foot lots, because that's the 1,250, I don't know.
Yeah.
Gosh, that
It
would be
just seems-
insane to have a house in here that's, well, you're 50 square feet over, that's gonna, I mean, I just don't know, I mean, like, I don't know, like, at one point, does it?
Well, it just depends. I mean, if you're going to change the gross floor area based on lot size and make it less generous,
Mhm.
it depends on where your new threshold is also.
Right.
So, I mean, it all kind of depends. If your threshold is still high for a CUP, then it won't make a difference. But if you lower that threshold,
They'll still come in.
or if you lower it based on, 90% of each one of these, it just depends on what you do. But until we actually get to some kind of a more concrete number, it's kind of hard to tell, but it could increase. I mean, it could make it so more plan checks are not by right, but they have to come before you. That could be the end result, but again, it depends on how you, relative
Right.
to those two things, how you play around with it.
I mean, it seems like, from my point of view, I would like to look at changing both these things in concert together.
Mhm.
So you lower the maximum number of square feet that people can have on a lot by percentage, or whatever, how you do it. And then in concert with that, you also think about what the CUP cutoff should be, because people are still gonna wanna have CUPs, or still wanna do something different. So you need to have both of them, but I think, you would capture most of it by, a good chunk of it by lowering the minimum, the maximum area of a house, and then If people want to do more, they can still pay the fee and trot in here and present it to us, but,
I think
probably get less, you know, it wouldn't be as much of a burden as just lowering this without lowering the other one together. And I think that doing them in concert makes a lot more sense, but we really have to, I mean, from my point of view, what I would really want to do before I made any decisions about the actual sizes is go out and look at houses on lots that we knew the sizes of and say, okay, I see what this means. Because it's really easy to talk about it, but I need to look at it. I need to see, okay, this is a 3,000-foot house on a 11,000-foot lot. This is a 2,000-foot house on a 5,000-foot lot. Just to kind of see what these look like, how big they are, to really have a reasoned and well thought out idea about what these numbers really should be.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what we want to get. We want to come up with something that works for.
I was gonna say the same. I mean, I think for the GFA, for the floor area percentage, I think that needs to happen in concert with the CUP threshold, but I think we need to study, like, I don't think it's good enough that it's 35% because it's always been 35%. I think we need to look at what makes sense and what makes sense at each level. Like, I don't think it should just be R1 is 35%. I think R1, that's 5,000 square feet, should be X percent potentially, and stuff that's 15,000 square feet should be,
Well, and it should also not just be the gross size of the lot, but the buildable part of the lot.
well, that's a good, that's
Because
another.
it does not, all things are not created equal, and if that's a big flat lot, then you might be able to put your 4,000 square foot house there nicely, and if it's, half the lot is,
That's a
is
great
a
point.
slope.
That's what in Hillside.
That's what I'm saying, is it's not just a blunt instrument, you gotta look at it, because it's not just, is the house big or is the house small? It's, does the house work?
Well, but that's an easy, that's another major pillar is like,
Because
in
we live
Hillside-
in a neighborhood that is an entire slope, the entire slope.
The entire city's on a slope.
The entire city's on a slope.
How is that currently like in HMZ? Because, well, clearly it probably doesn't address it, because up at One Carter, like the
doesn't-
project we're looking
doesn't
at,
really
like how does it take into account what's the buildable pad versus what's like category 3 and above, that you couldn't, I guess you're allowed to build on those potentially,
Not on slope 4.
but yet it's counted, that area's counted as part of your lot
Well,
size.
remember, that's a settlement agreement, so that's.
Well, that's potentially, but taking a lot like that as an example.
Yeah, you
like,
would be the gross size of the lot, and the part that wasn't buildable will
because
count
in
toward your
that lot-
calculation.
In that lot, or that type of lot, the buildable pad was like 5,600 square feet, which was category 0 or 1 or whatever it was. How do?
It doesn't
make
exclude
slopes-
those areas
At all.
in terms of calculating your total allowable,
And why don't we?
because it wasn't included in the ordinance.
Again, like,
That's the simplest answer.
One of the big pressures when we were updating the hillside ordinances was subdivision. And so the concept of minimum lot size does calculate in slope.
Yeah.
So you have to, in order to get a size, meet the minimum lot size in the hillside, there's some multiplier for like slope 4, like you only get counted at 2%, and then slope 3 at some percent. So that way, you really need to have a decent sized pad. But when it got to the issue of gross floor area, like I said, there was a lot of political pushback, and that just didn't fly.
I mean, you could wind up in.
because that's the big issue right there, was in lots like that where it's 13,000 square feet, but it's all around,
Right.
Funky
I mean,
land.
we had a
funky
lot
land,
less.
and then what's really buildable, and we basically shoehorn I don't know what we ended up, but about a 3,100 square foot house on 5,600 square feet of pad.
Yeah. But I
Gosh.
think one thing to keep in mind, though, is I agree with all those comments about the gross floor area, the pad versus slope, how you calculate those things. But if you start expanding and you put that into lowering these thresholds, you're not going to lower the thresholds.
Yeah.
I really think that the thing to do is just lower the thresholds.
Yeah.
There's political will
pick
for
one
that.
thing,
The city
yeah.
council already said they wanted it. we can get it passed, it'll actually get adopted.
Right.
And then we'll come back and
Come
revisit
back and
this
do the
stuff.
next thing.
And do the appropriate study, because you really do, if you're gonna lower the amount someone can build and take away their inheritance, that's what they'll say, you really need to have backup and not just, oh, we pulled 35% out of the hat because that's what it's always been, or because we stole that from Pasadena or whatever.
But, you know,
I mean, I think it's
but I
important
mean, just
that-
to this thing of weird lots, because I remember we had a lot where there was a flood control ditch that ran through it and cut off part of the lot over there. And they wanted to have the square footage of the house that would have fit on the whole area of the lot where, you know, a third of it was clearly completely unbuildable.
And the
So, I mean, there are these kind of exceptions, but I also agree with the idea that, you know, make a step. And probably the step is to reduce the maximum area. I mean, I think that there is will to do that, and I think that, you know, that could be step one. Step two could be to come back and think about the CUP cutoff and do these two things in concert with each other, but in a really thought-out way. So I think that there is support in Sierra Madre to do this.
Well, I agree. I think that the lowering the floor area does require some, and I don't really know even how we go about it. I mean, I would love to sort of
We just
do what you're doing.
We do some looking around and
Yeah,
come up
some
with
studying.
some ideas, some study, and
But I think this cut up,
write us a new language.
I think we should reverse it. I mean, what John's saying makes sense. I think if this is sort of, I don't want to call it a stopgap, but it creates more oversight
Mhm.
over a range.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something doesn't require much more in-depth research to kind of figure out that it's a good thing,
It's
you
easy
know.
it's an
It's there.
easier thing for us
Yeah.
to get.
But I think for it to really work, it's gotta be in concert with the floor area, but I think that part requires a little more studying. I would love to sort of put that on as something we discuss further, or if there's a way for,
I
you
just
know,
think
us
that
to
the
work with.
clock's ticking on this on the moratorium.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
The faster
something we
get
need
into
to look
this,
at
the
in this
better.
time period.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify this issue of moratorium, because whether there's a moratorium or not, I mean, existing homes are being remodeled and added on, and the moratorium does not
Exactly.
Doesn't
prevent
affect that at all.
So it really, this issue
irrelevant.
of doing it quickly because it's a moratorium, I just want to clarify, it
I think we
really.
want to do it quickly because of the
Yeah,
development.
the moratorium affects lots that have never had houses on before or water meters.
Yes, but
That's-
the ones that do
and
have 'em.
There aren't too many of those, but most of the work that we do in terms of plan checking and bringing to you really is for additions to existing homes that are not affected, or tear downs and rebuilds that are not affected by the moratorium. So just so you know, it you know,
So,
I mean, if we did the lowering the CUB cutoff sooner, and at the same time start working on this other issue, it wouldn't be a permanent, huge increase in the number of things that would come to us. And that may be, I mean, it's sort of an.
I don't think that's a determinant. I mean, whether it comes to us or doesn't come to us, the burden of labor to me is what's fair. And I think this is a good first discussion, but I can't just say it should be 4,000, it should be 3,800, it should be 35. There has to be some study here to make it make sense. Because right now, it's a conversation. If every project needs to be reviewed, we'll review every project. If not that many, but that, to me, that's not the determinant of whether we should do it. What we should do is what's fair, what's right, what makes sense. And I think I said, I think it's a good conversation, but I don't know that I'm ready to pick a number out of, and say, well, that's gonna be the cutoff.
Well, what information
what would
would
you
like?
need to see?
What information would you like to see?
Yeah.
What do you want
Right
to
now,
see?
I'm actually comfortable, we have a 4,000 number, and it's a gut check for a project that comes in, and.
For larger projects.
For larger projects, I think we've got something there. I don't, you know, I'm not concerned that something gigantic, we've had them come in, we look at them, and like I said, they go back and they come in slightly under 4,000.
But what's your hesitation?
I don't know.
For a gut check, lowering the gut check for
Because it
properties
just seems
that are smaller?
arbitrary, it just seems like we're picking a number because we're picking a number, I don't.
But it's the same number across the board.
Yeah, but, well,
It's
I
a
mean.
sliding scale, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I did like your idea, Jenna, about trying to do some kind of fact-finding.
Yeah.
Simply to see just what is out there and what really, what
'Cause
is.
I mean-
Because I think people would say that that's fair because that's what we sort of is, rather than them, again.
Yeah, and I think if the
feeling-
public wants to weigh in, the public's got to weigh in. It can't be, 10 o'clock on
Yeah, I
a,
mean, we're
on a
not making
Thursday night,
decisions.
because
We're not
yes,
making a
you-
decision.
I understand that, but I'm just saying is, I haven't heard the people complaining about their inheritances, and if they want to come down and complain about their inheritances, fine, let's do it in the, in the public light and let them do it.
You have to do it that way. But that's- I just think that.
I guess what I'm trying to
missing
find out is
on
what,
is-
we're not making a decision tonight, but what more?
I don't know, I'm learning as we go. I don't have a good answer for you. I know that, as you said, I don't have a bias that big houses are bad and small houses are good. I think the right house on the right piece of property is good. And that we should be incenting that kind of behavior. We may succeed in incenting a different kind of behavior where people annex properties, and we take where there were two houses, if those get developed, you may wind up putting two small lots together and putting one house on it, and that might be a better use of that land, and that might be, it might be a way to incent that kind of a behavior, particularly if someone's gonna live here as opposed to develop it for resale.
Right, but it's gonna be developed for resale.
But I guess right now.
I don't know that.
No, but- so- Okay, so I get your point, but to, right now, as it sits, we capture on this end of the spectrum is what we wind up looking at, right? For the 4,000 threshold is capturing this. But I would argue that there's a section of homes just below that that we don't capture or look at or vet, because that threshold set,
Then the
their
answer
law
is,
won't allow
then the
that.
answer is, then you're correct, then the answer is their 35% number is wrong, and that's the number that needs to be changed. If that's your concern, which is there's houses below 4,000 that don't work on the lots that they're legally can be built on, then let's study that number and get that number right.
Yeah, we gotta study that, I think.
And say, because I'll take that, again, have some research and have a hearing around that and say, fine, we're gonna lower that from 35 to 30 or whatever the right number is. And then if they want more than that, then they're gonna come here and we're gonna see it. They're gonna ask for a variance. And it may be that because of the layout of that lot that it's okay. But if that's what your concern is, you say, okay, we're catching everything above 4,000, but there's something between 4,000 and 3,000 that we're not catching because it's legally, it goes straight through because it's legally conforming, then that's the number I think that we should be looking at. And let's get that number right. Make sure that the municipal code is something that we feel good about, and the city council and the town supports that.
Yeah, but I don't even know if it's a number. It depends where the house is going.
Well, that's what I said, but
You
now
know,
we,
so
then we.
I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff. It's just not the number. I mean, if you got a bunch of houses that are 2,000 square feet, somebody puts a 3,000 square foot house right on top of somebody.
Well, we just went through this whole thing. I didn't participate in it because I had to recuse. Spent
Now's
many
your
hours.
chance.
Spent many hours in the hall. I'm not going to comment on it, but there were many things that were discussed about the house that had nothing to do with square feet, and they were bulk and mass and style and color and materials and all these other things, and so the actual square foot of the house, maybe they could have been designed in a more clever way. Who knows?
Well, but I mean, you're right. There are a lot of variables, but at a very base level in our code currently, the prescription is it's the same prescription for all.
And my opinion would be if the
And that's
problem
not
that
correct.
troubles you the most is there are houses between 4,000 and X that are legally getting built without public review, then the number that needs to be looked at now is not the CUP threshold, it's the buildable, the percent of the lot that's buildable threshold, and we need to come up with that number, and then you will see the houses that don't go there.
Yeah, I can give you a number that if you want to go off the minimum size, even if you start at 5,000, 33% works. And that 11,000 where you were talking about knocking off 200 square feet, then you get 3630 on 11,000 square feet. I mean, even if you use the same bonus potential, but now that's 2 percentage points.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Just-
you gotta
that's just
study,
for discussion.
yeah, I mean, I think it's kinda along that lines, you gotta study how big's the lot, how much house can you put on it, and what's appropriate.
Mhm.
But without sort of you know, sacrificing someone's inheritance and saying, gosh, I can only build a one-bedroom house here because by the time I take all my lot area out for garage, gazebo, covered patio, I've got
Well,
600
also-
square feet for the house.
We'll also
Like,
start
but,
with,
so we
with
gotta
the
look at
basic,
that.
which we made a fundamental change here in the time that we've been on the council, which is we now do count the garage instead of when we came on, they didn't count the garage. So now that 35% is inclusive of garage.
Yeah.
Prior to that, it was not. So that's a fundamental change
Yeah.
that's happened recently.
So that's why, in
So
light
then
of
if you
that,
need to
know,
go back and say the number now includes it, it includes the porches, it includes the structure, it includes everything.
It does.
Okay, then is 35% the right number? And I'd spend the time saying, let's zero in on get that number right, get that change in the ordinance, get everybody, you know, or the majority of people who need to be on board comfortable with that, and then you've got that gut check, you know, as opposed to how big is the house? Because how big is the house is not really the issue. It's how big is the house on that lot in that zone.
Well, yeah, and that's the part that you can't always capture by just a number, and that's where the CUP comes in.
Yeah.
Because.
I think you need the
know,
review.
Yeah, because.
We need both.
A 4,000 square foot house could be 4,000 feet on one floor, or 4,000 feet on two floors. It could be, you know, with a super pointy, a very peaky roof. It could be, you know, it could be with really high ceilings. It could, I mean, there's many variables. We have these houses come that have, you know, 14-foot ceiling foyers, which is hugely increases the bulk. You know, there's.
We count
it's-
that square foot twice.
No,
No,
16.
16.
Oh, 16.
You know,
I
so
had
that,
one
so
thing
that
on that.
there's a lot of stuff about it.
There's sort of, I think it's also the issue of right versus heightened review. I mean, the idea is that there's some amount of building that's just fine. Go ahead and build it no matter how ugly it is, because it's so small we can hide it. Okay,
Well,
using
it's
crass
insignificant.
terms, right?
Yeah.
And then there's
Unless
an
it's
amount
next to
that-
your house.
that it's really, it's big, so it really needs to look better, and then no way. And maybe instead of, this is sort of terminology, but I think it's really sort of more important on the way of thinking it. Instead of saying, you have a right to build up to here, but if you come closer, we're going to review it. Maybe saying, you have a right to build up to here, but if it's designed really well, we'll let you build a little more. I mean, that's what we do with height, right? The R1 height code is 24 feet, right? But if you want to get up to 30, it has to have some architectural merit.
Well, we measure height in weird way. Like,
Right,
we
we-
measure to 1/3 of the roof,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah, that- I mean,
you
that's-
can go to infinity if you want.
Third of the pitch.
There's no height.
But there's a way in the code to get height, additional height, if there's architectural design
something in-
and makes sense. And
There's
so,
something in R3 that you can get the density bonus for having exceptional,
right,
uh,
a good design.
Good
And so
design.
maybe,
Design, correct.
because one of the problems is, you know, keep going back to the same hearing that you guys had over and over again, but there's this concept where people come in and I have a right to build an X house. And maybe it's just the way to describe that zone where we want to have heightened review is rather than a zone that you have the right to build, but we're going to grill you for it, is to say, you have a right to build up to here, but this is going to be a bonus. If you have a really good design, or if you can demonstrate that you're not peering down into your neighbor's yard or blocking their view, you know, because that mindset, I think, really sort of changes the dynamic. Instead of having sort of this gut check that just has three findings that are really ambiguous on how you make those findings, and you sort of have an ad hoc make up the code as you go every time you have that CUP hearing.
Well, that's interesting, because then you turn the CUP into something where there's a potential gain. Let's say there's excellent design, or they merit some other things, and there's something at stake, which is some X amount of square feet above
of this.
that baseline. You know, and if you don't
It's
want to
not
bother
counted.
with it, then you get to the baseline and you're fine, you
Right.
know, so you've got a box that's X amount, but if you want that extra 500, 600, whatever it is, then you come through this process and it gets vetted, and you may end up with something, you may end up with all of that, you may end up with a little bit less, but you may, there's an incentive, then it incentivizes you to probably go for the CUP, because there's a possibility you could build something more if you meet sort of these.
But
That's
there's
not the
more
way most
control over it.
That's not the way most profit maximizing
No.
developers are going to think. They're going to go up to their of right and stop.
Yeah.
Because they've got cookie cutters, and they don't want to talk. They just want to smack cookie cutters and build.
See, that's why I think the of right number has to,
Go down.
we gotta study that. That's the one to really put a stake through, because
Well, what I was going to suggest is perhaps we can do some research as far as other options in terms of other cities, how they measure it. Perhaps there's something there that we can, will kind of shed some light on opportunities. What I was going to mention, though, is that this idea of, whether it's 35 or 25, I think ultimately that is somewhat subjective because there's so many moving parts. I don't think you're going to be able to study this to a point where you say 25 is optimal. It's going to be very hard to, I think you need to expect that there will be some subjectivity, and that's what you do. You test that out and you amend it and you use, say, 30% or 25 and see how that works. But I think it'll be hard to get to some number that you think is going to be perfect, and that's,
I wonder
I
if
think there's a level of subjectivity there.
I mean, it seems like one bit of information that would be useful to us is a look back at what's happened, say, in the last couple of years in terms of what sort of additions, changes have gone on in CUPs, not with CUPs, just, and that information shouldn't be that hard to come upon if it's our own.
Without CUPs, you mean? The ones that were under 4,000? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah,
That
and
went
the
through
number
plan
that got
check?
CUPs, yeah, just to say, so what's happened, what didn't get captured, what did get captured.
like this was what they were allowed to build, and this
And
is
a
what
list of the addresses,
happened.
so we can, sort of drive by and look and see what got built.
And you're saying
Okay.
between what sizes? Are you talking about 2,500 to
Lot sizes, you
4,000?
mean?
No, size of homes, because I think that's what you're talking about,
I-
homes
I
that are
think
under
I'm talking
4,000
about-
or up to
or-
4,000.
Capturing Manisha's thing, which is about different size houses built on different size lots.
Mhm.
So that, to see the large for the size lot built, what's happened. Because what we're trying to capture here is houses that are too big for the lot and the neighborhood. This is the issue that I'm concerned about. So, let's look around and see what's gotten built that we as a commission can walk up and say, oh yeah, that's what we want to stop, and then see what were the dimensions of that. Because people have mentioned different houses that are being built now. I can think of ones that I've seen that have gotten built before, that are the ones that we would like to see not happen. And if we can figure out what those are and how they pass through, then we can figure out what we can do to not pass those through.
I was gonna say another way, that's a good suggestion, another way maybe to take samplings almost, a couple blocks in town that are predominantly, R1, that are between 6,000 and 8,000 square feet or something, and allow.
That's lot area you're
Yeah,
talking
lot
about.
area, and
We can go look at
and
it.
then we, maybe, I'm maybe stepping on a limb here, but allow us to go and
Mhm.
go study that, or go look, basically divvy it up. You could even give,
My only suggestion would be, if you're gonna look at other cities' codes, you might not wanna go to Arcadia.
I didn't have that one in mind. So you know.
maybe that's a way to take, and then some that are like 11 to 15, I don't know, like Rancho or something, where there's, different sections with different types of lot makeups, and then we can sort of visually study those. Give us a list, of.
So you want me to bring that back to you at a next meeting, or or would I just send that information to you, say by email, and then you can do some looking into that? Is that how you'd
Yeah, I
like
think we
to
need
do
to,
that?
personally, I feel like I think that information that Gina's asking is probably good too, but that would be coming from you guys. But if there's a way to sample out certain portions of town and then let us,
Mhm.
Go look at it.
go look at it and see what, I
Okay.
mean, give us some primer on the size of lots that are.
Okay.
They are,
Make
we
sure
need some
you
information.
normalize for the size, width, and, because again, all of those They were measured as size without garage until very recently.
Well, you're talking about lot sizes only, though.
I'm
right?
talking about lot sizes.
Yeah,
But you're talking about
not what's on the
what
lot.
when you look at it, you say, this is a lot size X where a house of Y,
Currently, you mean.
yeah,
Yeah.
was approved.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have to have those two variables.
The ones for.
I think we're talking about
Yeah,
maybe
to the,
two
no,
different-
I know what Ken's saying, for the information Gina asked for, which is in the last 2 years,
Just
these
normalize it.
27 lots
So this,
of
this,
various
this lot
size.
and this square foot of house.
Yeah.
That's the information I want.
Okay, and so that's, and we are not sifting through for any other criteria. We're basically just giving you the lot size and the size of the house, and then you
Right,
can,
And the address.
okay.
Those three pieces of information are all I want you to give me.
But what I
I'll
would.
go look at 'em.
But what I would like in addition to that is to study on a broader scale, not too big, but like certain sections of town, like go here on this street, which is a block or whatever, that's predominantly lots that are,
50 by 100.
5,000 to 9,000, I don't know, whatever
Whatever.
condense the ranges and pick sample sizes, that'll.
Just get the zoning map, because if you get the zoning map that shows the subzones, you
Yeah.
can sort of look, and you can see the ones that have regular sizes, the ones that are sort of weird, and
Yeah, but it's hard to.
But the zoning,
tell
the zoning map doesn't tell you the lot size, and you can have lot sizes that are under the zoning minimum.
We can kind of tell, but not
That's
really.
the difficulty
I
with the
mean, you
zoning
can-
map.
you can-
You almost have to go, basically, if you drive around, or you really have to go to the assessors and then really kind of test out the lot sizes to see if it falls within that
Yeah, but that's a
criteria.
night, that's a
I
never.
did this when we were looking at the R2. I got the zoning map for the R2, and then I got the assessor's information for every lot and everything that was built.
R2 is a small
But
section.
well,
yeah.
it's easier on R2.
Yeah.
But, and then, because the assessor doesn't keep garages, I had to add the garages back in.
They don't.
And then I walked all the R2 streets. The thing about most of R2 is pretty standard. There's a couple of blocks down.
Yeah, it's all condensed in that one
that are
section,
in
but
the-
R1 is.
R1 is all over, and so if
That's
you
why I
look
feel
at
like
the-
And I actually would like to see that list, I don't know what the criteria are, but certainly buildable percent of the lot and what triggers a CUP for the cities in the San Gabriel Valley, and I would like to see Arcadia and see if it is an outlier. And see, in other words, are they getting that automatically, or is every single one of those, do they have to go in front of a board and get it approved? I mean, whatever's public information, it just, what are there, 20 cities in the San Gabriel Valley?
My understanding about Arcadia is that not very many projects go before the planning commission.
Okay, but I'm just
Their-
saying is,
their-
let's,
their
then we'll
threshold's a
see,
lot
it'll,
higher.
it'll be clearly an outlier.
Yeah,
So if
that's
the
what I've been
average,
told.
if the average in San Gabriel Valley, when you do it, is 30%, and we're at 35%, and Arcadia's at 45%, then we'll see, that's clearly an outlier. They've made a choice to make it an outlier, but let's look at it. Let's look at all the cities.
Okay.
It should be easy to pull together. I mean, what are the criteria we want? Buildable, percent of the lot that's buildable, and what triggers a CUP, right? Do you want anything else on that list?
No, that's it.
I mean,
You're
so-
talking about lot coverage.
Yeah.
When you say buildable area, you're really
Gross
talking
floor
about.
area.
Yeah.
Well, there's gross floor.
There's two
and-
different things, because lot
Exactly.
coverage
It's
in a lot of
different.
towns is
Lot
like
coverage is the
everything,
footprint.
it could be the driveway, it's all the, I think we're talking about
Floor area,
the
yeah.
floor area.
Okay.
And whether it does or doesn't include garage, if there's a asterisk, you can add to it. But I just say, if you look at that for, what is there, 20 cities in San Gabriel Valley, 25 cities? You should be able to look at it, and you'll see where you'll see what the mean is, you'll see what the average is, and you'll see where the outliers are.
Yeah. I would argue you don't even need that many, but you.
It's an easy sample.
Well, Pasadena doesn't have one rule.
Yeah.
Pasadena's got like a bunch of different rules, so it's not like you're gonna get, 20 data points for 20 cities.
But if you look for 20, you may get like 5 or 6 or 7. Like Monrovia may be straightforward, and Arcadia may be straightforward.
If you give me 25 data points, I can find the mean, okay, and I can find the outliers, real quick.
But it's not like that with the zoning stuff. It's like
Yeah.
some cities, I don't know. Anyway, I know what you're saying, but
They
It'd
break
be a
it down
good all right, you asked me, how do I get from
Yeah.
4,000 to 3,500, or how do I get from whatever? That's how I get. I start to look at the numbers and comparables, and I
Yeah.
can see the means, and I can see.
I mean, I think it's important data to have, as much as we can get
Mhm.
would be.
I don't really care what they do in Santa Monica. Okay,
So
we don't live in
I-
Santa Monica.
So if I can just
Well,
recap.
I also sort of, I mean, I think there's some cities that we don't compare to, say, San Marino may not be the best city to look at.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think that there's some cities that are a lot more comparable to
We
Sierra
can
Madre
cross
than
all the
others.
ones out when we look at it together. If you could just get 25 data points. it'd be great.
There's some in mind that you specifically suggest that we look at?
Cities?
Yeah.
Well, the immediate ones, I would look like Arcadia, just for that sake, Monrovia,
Duarte.
Duarte,
Okay.
you know,
That's-
San Gabriel.
South Pass,
uh,
you know.
You can go Temple City, I mean, basically as many as you can go.
You know, county.
I mean, there's one interesting one that's.
Glendora, maybe?
Yeah.
Great.
Mhm.
San Dimas. I mean, you know, it's-
Well, I mean, you wanna kinda, you
The
know.
data points will tell you the story. They'll show you
Pasadena's
where the
kinda
mean is,
funky,
They'll show you where the
but-
average is, and they'll
Yeah.
show you where the outliers are.
I mean, I can't even make sense of half the things that.
So just to recap, there are really three different things here that you're talking about. One is the one that Gina brought up as far as in the last 2 years, the
What didn't
homes.
we see?
Yeah.
Basically, the address, the size of the house, and the lot size, and that's above 2,000 square feet, or do you want everything? Is there some kind of a, from 3,000 to 4,000 is what you want?
How many
to
would,
have?
how many would everything
What is-
be? if
were you
it was
shaking
2
your
years?
head?
I
mean, would
I
it be
can't-
20? Would it be 25? Would it be 100? It's not that many,
I
right?
can't, well, we
Well, if
would
you
have to
talk
pull
about-
each one out
Yeah.
and review. We don't have a
Talk about
database that tells
additions
us
and new
what we
buildings.
have.
We don't have that.
So it's a manual
Houses, right?
process.
No, and I think we're not, yeah, we're
Within
not
the
talking
canyon
about
zone.
Canyon. I mean,
Talking
we're
about
talking
R1.
about R1, right?
But you gave a time period of the last 2 years, right? So does that govern, or does your threshold of, you know, like,
I'm trying to limit it a little bit,
Years.
only
Yeah, I mean, I don't
because
wanna-
it's
wanna
a
make
manual
this-
process of
I
actually
do not
pulling.
wanna
what's
make
reasonable?
a
Like, what's
giant-
what's
I don't wanna make
reasonable?
this
Say
a
between
giant
3 and
project.
4, which is somewhat, what,
3 and 4
3,000 and 4,000 square feet is what I was gonna
houses.
suggest.
Okay.
In the last 2 years. And
Mhm.
I mean, there's a lot.
Okay.
But
Well, let's look at that.
that's a majority, really.
Yeah,
That would be fine.
yeah.
I
that's
mean,
fine.
below that, I think we're gonna be parsing this, I think that,
Yeah, you start.
Yeah.
mhm. Okay, so from 3,000 to 4,000. And then the other
I don't
one,
want to make a huge project for you, because I know you guys are busy and all that, but I would like to have some information about this.
we'll try to
And maybe
get
it's-
as many as we can.
yeah, like
Um,
you get a list, what's reasonable,
give-
Gina, in
to give you a
terms
good
of number?
sample size.
Let's say there are 50.
Yeah.
Do you want 50, or is like 15, or the top 10, or like, what's reasonable
Say
to go look around?
25.
About 25?
20 to 25, say. I think that's plenty.
Okay.
In that size range that
Okay.
you were talking about?
Yeah.
And then the other one was the blocks, that you're trying to find some blocks that are
Yeah,
predominant.
I'm kind of thinking of like 3 representative
Blocks.
sections that give you the lot size. And I know what John's saying, I mean, it's a huge, maybe I don't know. Some, more like the information, I mean, I'm happy to, if you say kind of these 3 representative areas, I mean, I'll hunt and peck and
Some
get the
list in the
sizes.
general
But we're
plan that
basically
has
limited to like
information.
3 or 4 representative blocks.
Of certain lot sizes.
Yeah.
Ranges. I had written here
The
6,000
background
and
information
8,000,
you're using,
and
do
then
you remember that, John?
11,000 to 15. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's fine, something like that where you break it down into the smaller,
Okay.
middle, and then,
Letitia,
Okay.
wasn't there some lists of lots in the background that was used in the general plan, by the general plan group, where they were looking at all these different lots around? What was that? I remember seeing all these lists of addresses that people were going to check, and I can't remember what it was for.
Oh, that was for the build-out.
for the build-out numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the build.
That was
Oh, that's
potential
what it
build-out.
was. Yeah.
No, that was actually for the build-out for the general plan.
Oh, that's what it was.
In terms of the, you
Didn't it
know,
have data though on house size?
It did. I
Or
thought there
no?
was data on house size and lot size and stuff.
There was like a spreadsheet or something.
oh, that's something that we brought before
yeah.
you to.
Well, there was a
showing
bunch
the
of
build-out
handwritten-
number, is that
yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah,
There were two things. One was initially the General Plan Steering Committee set up a subcommittee to go around town to identify lots that they thought could change basically development and potential for new development in the next 20 to 35 years. So there was a number of them.
Long list of those.
And
yeah.
then
They divided
later
it.
on, the city council directed staff to, based on what we have seen coming through the counter or have had questions about certain lots, potential development, and other things, to actually augment that list with some other potential properties that we felt
I was just
were
thinking, if there was
possible.
some already made list that captured this, that we could use, but I guess.
There really isn't, though. We would really have to create it.
I mean, I'm willing to do a little bit of legwork. If you can give us those representative areas, I can, as long as they're just like 3 or 4 blocks, you know, I can
Okay.
try to get the square footages of what's there.
Mhm.
Because I think you would do it the same way. You'd
Well, we
probably
would
go to the
s- yeah.
assessors and.
We would start with the zoning map to get an idea.
Yeah,
of
but if
lot
you tell
size,
us.
Test out a few and
Okay.
then see comparatively in terms of the size of those lots, where we could find clusters that might
Okay.
fit that.
And then we as the commission maybe can investigate the clusters,
Mhm.
like as far as,
Mhm.
I don't know.
And the way of giving you this information would be, I would send email, do you want me to bring it back to another meeting or just?
Yeah, I think
or
it should
just-
be in the context of a review for the next discussion.
Yeah.
But I mean, in terms of you doing that particular work to go out there and
Well,
all
can you,
that, I mean,
can you send it
I
to
would
us like an
provide you the
item?
data.
Yeah, provide us like it's an item for discussion, like the week or, like you'd agendize it and
Okay,
be
so
in a
I will
packet.
bring this back
Yeah.
to you then, and then you go out there and you look at.
Be agendized, so it's a public hearing, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah,
And other
before
people
our
should be able to
meeting.
get the data too.
Okay,
As a packet of information.
I'm saying that whatever you send us should be available to the general public. If they
It
want to
will.
go look at the 25 houses, they should go look at them too.
okay.
And then there was a third item, was that Ken's?
Yes, the cities in the San Gabriel Valley, that
Okay.
you listed some cities, and basically what you would like would be how the floor area, allowable floor area is calculated for
Yeah,
the
the
What's
cities.
percentage.
comparable to the 35%?
However they calculate that,
of
GFA.
What's in it, what's out, what's comparable to that, and what triggers a CUP.
And what's their CUP? And if we can have all that by the next meeting, that would be great.
I was gonna say,
And Danny's gone.
if this could be continued to a date uncertain, only because I don't want to promise and then have
You're
to
gonna be short
push
staffed
this
soon,
out, so, yeah.
If there's a way to, gosh, I hate to
I will try to
just-
bring it back as soon as I can,
As
but
soon
I.
as you can, but if we could, if it's gonna be quicker to give us, like, since there's 3 prongs of information that we're asking for, like, if you can gather that and then bring it to us, then we can.
Oh, one by
shoot,
one, you-
I don't know, if it makes it
Whatever's
faster,
easiest.
rather than waiting for all 3 pieces,
Okay, I'll see if we can do
mean,
it that way.
because then the discussion can
discuss them
continue.
separately too.
Okay.
As long as, but make sure it's available to the public, so whatever you give us.
Think about that if that
Okay.
helps.
Okay.
Okay. All right, we gotta wrap this up here. All right, we're
Do you
done with the
remember what
discussion?
happened 4 hours ago?
Yeah, I was here.
Yeah.
Oral communication, audience, there's an additional opportunity for any person to address the planning commission at 8 a.m. not on the agenda. When addressing the planning commission, begin by providing your name and address for the record. Nobody? No takers? All right, we will close audience comments or oral communication and bring it back to the planning commission. Anything?
So what's the timetable on Danny, and is there an interim plan, or is there something going on?
We are recruiting for a director, and there will be interviews starting next week. So
Who's doing the interviewing?
there will be a panel doing the interviewing. There will be 2 sets of interviews. The first panel is next week, and the second panel.
Who is on the panel?
The panel, it'll be consistent of other planners or directors from other cities. That's the first panel.
Okay.
The second panel will be staff.
Staff, cities.
So the planning commission doesn't help interview the person who's gonna be the director of, no?
Mhm.
Really?
We've never done that.
Not in Sierra Madre. Mhm.
Is that because that came down in a tablet from a high mountain
Right under
somewhere?
35%.
Where did that come from? Okay, so if it's possible, I think that, given that we're going to be working together, that it might be reasonable to include one or two commissioners in the interviewing process. So I would like to make a request, however that could be considered.
I can pass that on to the
That
city
would be
manager.
terrific.
Mhm.
Seems like that would be a reasonable, if we're the
yeah.
people the person's working with, that they would be involved.
I'm not sure how the panel is established or what the guidelines are, but I can certainly pass that on if there's an
Terrific.
opportunity for that.
We should have done this in reverse, but planning and community preservation staff.
Thank you. As you noticed, Danny is not here tonight.
Yes.
He meant to be here. This would have been his last meeting.
Oh.
And he tried, but he couldn't make it.
He slipped out without saying goodbye?
He's actually sick.
Oh.
He was out sick today. He left sick yesterday. He
Okay.
asked me to let you know that he will be calling each one of you before he leaves. His last day is October 30th. So between now and then, he will contact you. But unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight, so.
Oh, man.
Also, your next meeting is November 6th, and it's a general plan review meeting, so.
What's left?
There's still some implementation left on about 7 or 8 sections. The land use map should be coming back to you as well on those items that you asked for further information. Glossary and appendix also will come to you. And that's pretty much it.
And that's it? We'll never talk
Well,
about the
the-
general plan again?
There may be 2 or 3 more meetings, but those are the items that you would have, coming to you. It just depends on how fast I can get them ready for you, so.
One question for you, and this is kind of dovetailing on 610, now that we approved it, future further projects there was
Talk about kind of looking at it
Mhm.
first holistically. Is that gain any traction with the potential applicant to do that, or how?
Well, it appears that they are willing to do that. That's
Yeah.
the understanding I got from, from what they mentioned at that meeting. So, whether that's something that you're willing to look at, I'm not quite sure how practical that would be in terms of the actual approval process, how that would work.
Yeah, I had a hard time getting my mind around how that would work.
Mhm.
I sort of think the city attorney might have some input into what that would mean.
I just feel like there's not enough trust there, Gina.
You think?
I mean, if the applicant wants to put the time and effort into developing a master plan of how the different lots would lay out and what some of the design criteria would look like. It's starting to work a little bit into design review. That can come back and be reviewed and potentially approved as a separate matter. But it doesn't mean that each individual house is not going to go through the same
No, it would
level of
still.
rigorous review. What it would mean is that you get 2 bites of the apple. You get to look more holistically at the area. It doesn't seem like it would be a bad thing. It's a little more work, but then you're coming at each individual lot because they are individual. They've got different topography, different size building pads, and that should be taken into consideration when you master plan it. So there'd be more thought going into how the community's going to look, each house relative to the other. I mean, they could even get down into the details of, maybe on this lot it's a single story, on this lot, because we don't want a massive double-story houses looking like a fortress. Those kinds of things could be considered in a master plan. It doesn't seem to me that it would be a poor tool for you to use. It would be an additional tool, and it would be more work for them. It will push out the length of time. If they say, hold everything, we're going to take a time out and do a master plan, then they should be doing that first before you approve the next property or the next design that would be considered part of that master plan. So would push everything out farther, and you'd have an additional tool. Are they willing to do that? I don't know.
They said they were, but.
But that's incumbent on them.
They have to elect.
It would be,
provide
yes.
that, okay, so.
What happens now to 610? Does that go to the city council?
No, it's done.
It's done. I mean,
That's
it's
it? So there-
Well, unless it's appealed, there is an
Unless it's
appeal
appealed.
period. There's a 14-day appeal period, so if somebody.
Someone being someone from the community
Yes.
Somebody could appeal it to the city council
to the city council to overrule the planning commission's approval.
to consider.
I see.
Mhm.
Because usually when we approve things here, it goes to the city council for,
Something.
If he gets appealed, every approval for CUPs, for variances or what have you, have a 14-day appeal period. So.
So if no one does
Most
that-
of them don't get appealed, that's
But
why
we,
they don't go
we
to
did
city
hear
council.
people talking about the fact that this was against the general plan as it was anyway, whether we approved it tonight or not.
and an appeal just consists of a letter. If they send a letter saying we don't like the planning commission's decision.
They have to provide a basis for their appeal, and they do have to pay a fee, which is 75% of the application fee.
That's a chunk of change.
And then they would submit the application within the 14 days. If that expires and there are no appeals, then the decision is considered to be final.
Okay.
Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned.